Okay, hello everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Sonic Adventure 2 Hero Story PB Analyses. Today, I'm going to be taking a look at Drywall's PB, or Drywalleater's PB. This is a little bit of a different type of run, because this is a PB that was actually achieved today, so this is like brand new, hot off the press, so it's actually a good time to really do this analysis to give Drywall a very quick look into where strengths and weaknesses are, possible improvements. So this is a 40-30 RTA PB. I've already seen that the IGT is a 27 though, so it's a high 27. And I already know why the RTA and IGT divide is as large as it is, which is something that we are going to get into as the run progresses. So let's just begin and have a look-see. Yes, split zones. The best ones. So modified music. This is legal for now, so this is okay to use in a run. Just from the start, from what I'm seeing in this boarding section, try to not use a lot of stick movement here if you can. Like, if you can just use the most gradual direction changes, that is generally going to be better than zigzagging a lot, but I mean, it's just a very minor thing. Let's see what goes on here. Okay, so the fastest possible way that you can get on the rail like this is to try and use a short hop, because like if I run this back, then you pretty much use a full hop, which I assume this is just to make sure that you're lined up properly. But a counterpoint example just in my game would just be something like that I'd ideally want to try and use a short hop from here. Something like that. Because generally speaking in this game, whilst you're holding the A button to jump higher, use hover frames, and I'm going to have to let my cat out just now. While you are holding A like that, then the game is applying air drag, which forces you to slow down in the air. So just an element to be aware of, that with air travel as Sonic, you can generally have more forward momentum by using as few hover frames as you can manage. That will actually make you go forward at a slightly faster rate. So I'm just going to quickly let my cat out and then we'll start proper. Alright, that was just a little primer to start with. Let's carry on. Alright, so with this spot as well, you ideally want to not scale the wall, as was shown here. The best way that you can do this section is to come down here as normal as you did, but then turn right so that you are along the floor like this, with your second spin dash going down the slope, and then your third spin dash wants to be when you're on this staircase. There is still like a right and a wrong way to do it. If you do your third spin dash here before you reach the staircase, this is the wrong way to do it, quote unquote, because once you cross this vertex at the bottom of the staircase in bolt form, it causes you to actually start decelerating a lot more rapidly than you otherwise would. So when I reach the top of the staircase here and turn left, I'm not going to be going very fast. Like you can see, I'm going very slowly there. Whereas if I just start the spin dash from here, it's really not much further forward than where I was before, I will have a lot of speed when I'm at the top of the staircase. You can see that I'm going considerably faster there compared to just being slightly further back and being here. Because the game just forces you to decelerate a lot. So when you're rounding this corner, if possible, you do just want to go over here like this, turn right, and then do your third spin dash on the staircase like that, and you will go considerably faster. Camera. Kinda got through there, fine though, that's okay. And I'm assuming this is just going to be a CE skip. Yeah, this looks like it's just going to be a CE skip. Yeah, there we go. Okay, so I can see on your input cam here that you're holding right. This is what I used to do, but I don't necessarily recommend this method anymore. I prefer to hold left here now. And I'm going to run this back and see what your directional usage was here as well. Okay, up and down movement, that's correct there. Yeah, just use the control stick more aggressively there, because it looked like you were barely using the control stick around those corners, which kind of caused that issue that you had there. But I'm going to get a C-skip myself and show... I don't have an input cam myself, just like take my word for my inputs. I use the left analog stick method after getting the skip. Okay, so... Get it. Okay, so at this point I'm holding left on the analog stick, and as long as I haven't landed in the wrong spot when I actually triggered the skip, I'll just end up... Okay, I did end up in the wrong spot. This can uncommonly happen, but this is basically as recoverable as when you end up on the far right wall here, so it's kind of like doing what you did in your PB, except it's just in the reverse direction. Like, the same thing should work. Like, here you just jump and homing attack left with a bit of up, and if you're something like here, you just go right with a little bit of up. But ideally, with the method that I showed, and if you use left input, you end exactly here. Sonic should like always be here. You can see that like the game tries to stop you from going through this rail. And when you're here, you can just do a short hop and then do an up left homing attack. And it's a lot less likely to miss, in my opinion, because of how much closer you actually are to the rail. Like, that's relatively simple to get. So that's my preferred method. Okay, so the only thing here was when you did the spin dash, like your spin dash charge here was a little too late. And this is like a difficult one to gauge. This is part of the reason why I use the specific method that I do here, is that when people see me do this section, I like more go down the middle of the road here. And this is so that I can use the speed pads just before the first ramp to actually force me over the hill. So it basically widens the time that I have to do the spin dash, unroll, and recharge correctly, and the game basically forces me over the hill for free. But if you can go down the right side like this, it is faster because of you not getting force unrolled partway down the road. It's really just a case of, yeah, just working on your timing a little there. I think if you had just started the next spin dash as soon as you could, that probably would have worked, because it looked to me like you unrolled from the spin dash and then waited a little bit. I'm going to rewind again and just look at the input cam here. The second X input wasn't that much after, but it didn't look like it was a super fast double input either. So if you were trying to do that just as a double input, as a normal spin dash chain, then this might indicate that maybe your spin dash chaining could be a little more efficient just from practicing the motion. It's easiest to practice it on Metal Harbor, and that's where I'm going to really see how good the spin dash chaining actually is. Important thing to note though, when you are in this sort of situation where you get forced into the air, so if you miss a hill and you end up in the air like this, you don't want to continue holding down. What you ideally want to do is actually just hold left or right, because you should be flying into the invisible wall so that it drags you down faster. Because since you're trying to spin dash down these hills, the sooner you can get grounded, the sooner you can start going faster again. And running into the walls makes you descend faster, so you'll get onto the ground faster and you'll start your next spin dash faster. So that's preferable to just going down like that, because you get so much extra airtime. You could have been grounded like at least a second sooner and then been spin dashing again. Okay, so this method works. I don't personally like this method too much, but you know, it works. If you're not already using this ramp on the left as a visual cue for when to do your spin dash and roll, I find that it's very reliable. So, like, I'm guessing that, yeah, you basically do it at this time. I don't know if you are actively looking for that, but if that's not what you're doing, and if this just happened to be a coincidence, just watch this back again and you will see that your spin dash unroll was at the correct time, and it is pretty much at exactly the time that you passed this ramp on the left. Yeah, so you can use that as a visual cue, if that's not what you're already doing. Oh, okay, what caused this? You were definitely on the left. I think you just homing attacked. I think it was actually the homing attack here that caused you to miss the goal ring, so I guess just don't homing attack there, because I don't homing attack there personally, and I never miss the goal ring as long as you're against that right-hand wall. split sounds. Alright, so Bigfoot. A little too far, whatever. Yeah, I just wouldn't do any inputs there in that case, Drywall. So at the start of this looked like just a normal homing attack forwards. Yeah, you actually waited quite a while after you had control of Sonic to do that, and this is just a regular homing attack because the trail isn't being cut short. So doing a homing attack cancel here is, you know, in the first place going to get you a bit more mileage, but it also kind of helps to start moving as soon as you can, which I believe tends to be about 7.6 on the clock. Let's just see here. I'm watching the in-game timer here and watching for when the camera changes from this view. It's at around that time, yeah. So pretty much any time after 7.6, 7.7, you'll be able to start acting with Sonic immediately. This is the method that Traitor uses for getting back to the box, and I actually quite like this method, so... Yeah, I actually do quite like the method displayed there of getting back to the box quickly. Something that I should look into myself. And thank you for removing the mouse cursor from the game feed. Okay, so this free piece check was, I mean, I can already see that you have a free piece 3 in front of the wind tunnel, which is nice. This free piece check, I think you should have just used more directional input before you started moving off. Because it looked to me like you didn't rotate the camera enough before Knuckles started moving forward. That's just my observation there. I'm not sure if you've actually seen the free piece using that check before, so if you are just following theory, or if you've actually done it successfully and you know exactly how to do it and what you're looking for. But yeah, rotating the camera a bit more than you think is always a good thing there, just to make sure you get a good internal view of the box. Either way, very nice free piece. So green ping near the 6 pillars means it's one of these back ones, so it's either the one here or the one on the other side, back here. Okay. So yeah, so in other words, it can't be one of these two. Let's just bring it back again. In fact, hang on, am I dumb? No, I'm dumb, I'm wrong, sorry, because I just... you were going towards the... It was when the radar was already pinging green before I even commented on it. Since you were spawned here and the radar isn't pinging, then it is one of the back ones. Yeah, ignore me. Yeah, so at this point, now that the radar is pinging, it means it's one of the two back ones. If the radar was pinging green when you had spawned in, though, then it means it's one of the two rocks at the back, like closer to where you start. So it's this one, yeah, in the corner. At this point, you may as well have just gone up to the top before getting your next hint, because, I mean, 2 pieces at the bottom, there's no way that you've got a third piece at the bottom of the stage. So rather than going for this hint, I would have just gone up the wind tunnel and got my next hint at the top, but it's fine. At least now you know where you're going a bit earlier. And it is a garbage piece, unfortunately. Movement here is just a little bit janky, I do have to say. Like, there's... Knuckles' movement in general, I'm seeing here, is just very jerky, I suppose. Like, if I go to Wild Canyon and do, like, the same kind of route that was on display there. So let's assume that I'm just... This is what I mean, that, like, when I start the stage, I can hold forward, but I just hold the control stick. Or I hold the camera button to rotate it, and you can see there that it ends up inside the box. And then I pretty much start moving Knuckles at the same time as I do it. But anyway, let's assume that I'm just going for at the foot of the pillar, as you were before. You really just, if you can, you want to just make your direction changes as gradual as you can like this. Like, there's no real need to... There's no real need to do stuff like this where you're making Knuckles zigzag around a lot, and it does cut your momentum quite a bit more than you would actually think. So if you can use the most gradual direction changes, it will help more than you would think, even for a character like Knuckles. Okay, just a note here, for Eggman 1, you can save probably a good couple of tenths here, as long as you make sure that you are facing forward before you fire the first shot, because you actually hit him here with your second shot. Like, let's go back here. yeah, you're just mashing X as the fight begins, and you can see that your first shot is going to the side like this. So, in other words, like if you see here, this shot could have already hit, but instead you're still waiting to hit him at this point. You need to like wait a little longer before you fire this first shot as well, because you need to make sure you're aiming it upwards, but this game is weird in terms of it can throw the shots with more momentum if you're already moving forwards as well, so it does save like a little bit of net time to just make sure that you are hitting with the first shot. Yeah, because to me that looked like on hit 3 you only lost a couple of tenths of a second there, but you still ended up with a 13-15. So like just like I say, the time loss that you had on hit 3, it was a small amount of time loss, and considering you can get 12.6 on this fight, this means that like, there was like half a second total that was lost on this fight, and that half a second didn't come from just the hit 3 time loss, so that was a combination of hit 1 and hit 3 time loss. Alright, Prison Lane. Really early door open, nice. I've mentioned this several times, like in the course of analyses, but Tails' movement, as you probably know, is really predicated on using as little cornering and as little airtime as possible. The airtime is particularly important. Like, if you can get around corners just short hopping, you really should. So for corners like this, if you can just do a short hop to try and maintain as much ground time as possible, rather than just doing like a full jump like that, then again, this will start pulling like a lot of time saved together for Tails. Like individually, none of these are going to save very much time, but it's when you do a bunch of these in a row that it starts saving a lot of time together. So I'm going to be looking at if this is like a general movement habit. That was early, I would say, because one of the problems you have with getting up this particular ledge is that if you go as early as you do here, then at this point when Tails gets on top, then Tails currently has no forward momentum. Like, he's on here, but you are virtually at a standstill, and now you need to do the cornering, so you basically need to start from a standstill multiple times. Whereas the theory is that, like, if you just wait until the elevator rises a bit, and then just have some momentum before you get up there and can do your cornering in the air, you should hopefully be able to conserve a little bit more speed as you start to move in the direction that you currently are now in the run. And it is perfectly fine with me repeating stuff from other analyses, because I do all of these assuming that it's the first analysis that someone has watched, so that it's, you know, beneficial to anyone watching. It's totally fine. I'm just saying this is a common thing that I see in a lot of runners. That fence up is pretty nice though. I would wait longer before going for this door though. Like, getting up here is fine, but you should kind of wait around this area to get both of these lock-ons, because coming forward here as you are now, this really only loses time to move on as soon as possible, because this door's still closed. Like, you can't proceed until this door's open. So you may as well, like, wait a second or half a second to wait for this door to start opening, and then move forward from here. So if I pull up my game feed again, then it's like something like this. Like, I just wait around there, and then once the door's open, then you can start moving towards it. Like, I approached it slowly, but again, I needed to wait for it to open to be able to pass it in the first place. So, yeah. And then if you can get around there in one jump, obviously that's going to have better results as well. Okay, this jump just looked like it was late. Yeah, this is just a late jump. Like, the movement required for this flawless box break is honestly non-trivial. Like, getting a jump onto this box and destroying the box you're going towards and not hitting either the wall or the other box is honestly a bit more involved than it seems. But obviously, if you can get it, then you're standing to save a little bit of time. Let's see what I can do here. I tend to go for the one on the left. If you can go for the one on the right, I think it is slightly more optimal just because it's a shorter path, but I personally find it a little more difficult to line up. But it does take quite a bit of practice to get that, but it is definitely worth putting some practice into. So yeah, just that maneuver there looks to me like it probably lost at least a second needing to wait like that. This enemy here, I actually, at this point, I hug the left wall and I'm aiming up left, and it typically allows me to get this enemy a bit early. So like this. And see, like, I got him quite a bit earlier than you did in your PB there. Doing the pivot turn there was actually a nice touch, though. I would try and avoid using a lock-on combo whenever you can. And by that I mean, at this point, you have a ×1, ×2, and then a ×3 combo. You should just be repeatedly pressing the button to try and release the shots one by one, because it does get the enemies destroyed sooner, and this is going to be relevant throughout all of Prison Lane, and it matters in some spots in Hidden Base as well. Like, if you can get the lock-ons off as early as possible, that's generally better, and you do that by getting as many ×1 lock-ons as you can, rather than waiting for a combination. Because otherwise you may not have needed to slow down and wait for this door to open. Because I generally only need to slow down minimally for that door. Let's, again, have a comparison check. Like, I didn't slow down there at all, and I was almost still under the door by the time it completely opened. Normally, I do slow down a little bit. I do a little bit of waiting, but just demonstrating there that I made no effort to slow down, and I still nearly made it under the door, just from getting 3 ×1 lock-ons. And the lock-ons weren't even as quick as I could have done them. This was actually a pretty nice elevator trigger, because there wasn't much airtime between when you jumped and when you actually landed on the elevator, so the elevator triggered quite quickly. Yeah, 54, this is pretty okay. Waiting for the door to open, that's good. I can see there's like a couple of things that you tried to do there. Like, you tried to get the enemy by jumping. This is the right idea, but I think you actually jumped a little too high here, because I think when I do this that I don't like end up almost at the ceiling like this. And then you tried to do the pivot turn strat here, but the way you ended up rubbing on the door and going to the left here, I think that just means you didn't go far back enough. So this maneuver is definitely a good idea, and it's actually a little better than what I do in runs, but if you're going to use this, you should probably use a little more back input before you pivot towards the door. Otherwise, yeah, this is going to happen consistently. And if you can shoot these boxes out the way, this is a bit faster than jumping over them as well. Like, again, anytime you can stay grounded. So typically what I tend to do here is I just commit to going on one side of the corridor. I typically aim for the right boxes, so I just try and get the right-hand boxes out the way. Because I see people like try and run down the middle of this corridor, but that does necessitate that you get rid of all 4 of these boxes, and if you miss one, then Tails is just going to run into them. But if you just pick left side or right side, then you only have to worry about getting one row, and it's a lot easier to aim for them. I mean, in this situation, it's a little awkward because Tails is still turning around, so I can certainly see being worried about actually facing towards the boxes in time, but in general, you should always be aiming to destroy these boxes and just keep running along the ground. Yeah, just make sure you get the enemies as quickly as possible. So I heard some box breaks there, so let's see how this goes. Alright, so just from the fact that like you did one big jump there, I'm assuming that you played this section with the assumption that you have broken the boxes. An important thing to understand for this section though is, I'm going to just play through a bit here, because this is an important thing to demonstrate. It's just that this section is equally playable whether the boxes are there or not. You just need to be aware of whether they are there or not. And you actually do that by listening to an audio cue. Yeah, I just do a short hop there to try and hit the enemy, and like I say, just break the boxes on the floor if you can. So I play with the assumption that the boxes are intact, and this means that I do 2 short hops here after the corner. I just do hop, hop. And this works, but if you are someone who aims to jump onto the boxes, then you need to be aware of the boxes actually being there. Because what is typically going to happen a lot is that while you're here shooting towards the two enemies that are like here and here, because you're shooting in this direction, sooner or later you're going to accidentally hit the boxes. You can see like my shot comes super close there. So yeah. So you heard 2 box breaks there. So it's those box break sounds that will tell you whether the boxes are present. And like you need to know that, because if I approach this now assuming the boxes are going to be there, I'm just going to do a short hop, and obviously, number one, I haven't made the jump because the boxes aren't there. But more importantly, this gap here is actually just big enough under the right or wrong circumstances to let Tails pass entirely through it. So you can actually take a death here. Just a full death. And if you are someone who expects the boxes to be gone, then if you miss the boxes, then by the time you get here to do the jump, then you're going to have already hit the boxes and they cut your momentum, and it's just a bad time. So with this section, you really need to be aware of whether the boxes are there. And as I said, that is based entirely on listening out for the audio cue as you are shooting towards those 2 enemies. As far as getting hit by the enemy here, I'm going to need to take a death to demonstrate this, so I'm just going to quickly do that in my game. Yeah, I know my feed's not up right now, because I need to just respawn for a bit. I do need to respawn here. So I'll just replay from this section again when it's time. But what we saw here was that this enemy just shoots you out the air. And this is caused by a couple of things. Number one, your position here. Ideally, you want to be like more to the left here. And you went a little bit too late. And typically, I look at when I can see the enemy coming here to judge when to go. It's like, you can see the enemy here. At this point, first of all, like I say, I'm in this position. And so when I see the enemy here, I just move forward and then I jump. But it's a little while until you start moving and you're a bit too close to the enemy. And the result of that is that this shot hit you fairly easily. So by contrast, this is, the point that I was at. So the boxes are intact because I didn't hear them break. So I'm on this side, see the enemy, and just go. And once you're on top of the ledge there, you can jump again to make sure that you avoid the shot as it comes towards you. And this also, doing another jump there, lets you turn to the right. So now I'm facing in this direction to start running along here with momentum as well. Waiting for the door to open there isn't incorrect though, so nice. Again, just short hop when you can. Like jumping to get up this ledge, there's no need to use a full jump like that. If you can short hop, then it's generally better to do that. I don't necessarily mind using a couple of short hops like here though, just to cut your speed a little bit as you're approaching the door, because as you found here, you just approached the door a bit too late, or too early even, and you hit the door as it was opening. And same thing with short hopping here as well, to hit the enemy. That typically you want to do the jump at this second like shadow marker on the ground, which that's basically when you do it. But you do like pretty much a full hop to get this enemy in the air here, when you can actually get away with just using a short hop in this spot. Missing this enemy continually lately. I love that. So I'm just going to short hop here. And I still got the enemy without too much difficulty. And then I barely made the gate jump. Lol. So same thing again here that I mentioned before about just using short lock-ons if you can. Like getting a ×4 here, this made it so that this gate started dropping quite late and you actually struggle to get on top of the gate. Like, because the enemy is destroyed a bit late, you jump, and I think you actually struggled a bit with that. Yeah, just do what you're doing here, which is using lots of short multiple lock-ons to get ×1s. That's really the best way you can handle that. Yeah, this is the method that I use, though I do prefer to not land on this roof here. I'm not convinced that landing on this roof is better. I think it's better to just wait a little and then homing attack down here and proceed as normal. The proof's kind of in the pudding here that you got a like 8.3-ish connecting with the zipper. And for me, using like the same trick there but going along the ground, if that's executed well, I'm at least like half a second faster at this point. Okay, this isn't bad. You can just use a homing attack here rather than hold the jump and wait to land naturally. It will be like a little bit faster because the homing attack is going to make you descend sooner. Like right here, you could have already homing attacked at this point and be grounded a little bit sooner. Had quite a lot of forward momentum here, which made you basically need to slow down. So I think you overcharged the spin dash. Yeah, you held onto that spin dash for quite a while, which meant that once you crossed this gap, you actually needed to slow down and wait before just crossing this gap. So that's something that could be like a little more efficient, I think. Like if I just played the start of the stage as well. So we've got a 21-7-2 upgrade grab. And I'm going to try and do the same thing, just not significantly differently. Like say, going along the floor. So 7.95 for comparison, so I'm like 3/10 ahead-ish, 3/4 ahead of where you were before. And mine wasn't particularly efficient there either. Homing attacking here, like I say. Not slowing down here, ideally. And that's like 0.9. So this isn't even a particularly good upgrade time for me, but it's almost a second faster than what you got just there. And there was nothing like significantly different about that. It's just that some of my sections were a little bit cleaner. So the spin dash chaining here, like definitely, it's not like the worst that I've seen. But the one thing I noticed is that you just let this spin dash roll, which, I don't know, I'm not entirely convinced about that. This is a very good section to just practice your spin dash chaining in general, though. Like, if ever there was a spot which is just good for practicing spin dash chaining, it is this section. Like, you can just do this for ages. This is just an efficient section to practice it on. And the theory is just that once you're already at high speed, you want to ideally spend as little time spin dash chaining as you can. Like if you hold it a lot like this, it's just really unnecessary. Because you're already at high speed and it's not going to make you go any faster. So like if we like time it here, I'm going to try and like spin dash, I'm going to try and chain it efficiently, and I should get my 4th chain after I get through the next set of speed pads. So 1, 2, 3, and then my 4th chain comes out there. Whereas, you know, if I hold it a bit longer in between each one, then the 4th one comes out pretty much when I'm already at the ring trail. And it's not, like, significantly faster, I don't think. If you're at low speed, you absolutely should. But if you're already at high speed and just maintaining it for a short time there, it's not, like, significantly different. Because the speed pads, you know, already give you quite a high starting speed. And maintaining a spin dash charge only does so much to give you more speed when you're already at a high speed value. Like, it stores your previous speed value and then adds to it, but it's not going to go up past a certain value. you can maybe like try and pay attention to coming off these pulleys as soon as possible, because there's quite a lot of air time that you got here, and you were like halfway across by the time you landed. And it's the same thing here. You waited pretty much right until you were at the top of the pulley before releasing here, and this actually makes this loop skip considerably more difficult if you do that. Like again, if you pay attention to when you got off this pulley here, I'm just going to slow this down actually. Thanks YouTube for skipping tons of frames there. Like you're landing around here, which is like no time to stop and charge another spin dash before doing this loop skip. Whereas if you try and get off that pulley as soon as possible and be grounded as soon as possible, you can like not stop and still have high speed. So I was a little too early there because, you know, I got trapped on the corner. But you can see what I'm trying to do here. Like that. Like, I don't stop and I have enough speed to still make it over and get loop speed at the same time. So let's have a look at like how this loop speed goes. Yeah, like you needed to come to a stop to do this. And oh, you're way too high here though. Way too high. And yeah, the camera's trying to invert there. If you are too high up the loop here, you can see what's happening here. The camera does try to invert. So you can be way lower down on the loop. The only thing to remember is that if you're going to homing attack to get loop speed, you should just wait until you're through the loop before you do it. And thanks, Razor Synapse, go away. Yeah, like, you did a super late homing attack and like got loop speed there, showing, you know, how it works. But it is safer than you'd think to be low down on the loop. Just don't homing attack before you reach the loop. Like, I did it a bit too early there before I was through the loop and it throws me through the bottom. But if I just approach it, I'll have like the same approach that I had before, where I land as soon as possible after this next pulley and just spin dash, charge and jump. And as long as I make sure I've reached the loop and then a homing attack, you'll get through fairly safely. And again, because you are holding A for not as much time and not using as many hover frames, that will help you go a little bit faster as well. That, I think this kind of worked by accident. I'm going to have another look at this. Yeah, something tells me this was not entirely on purpose, because you actually came off the floor there and were about to ride the rail for a bit, but you are holding X, so you do actually get storage under this somersault barrier, which is nice. And then this part definitely went correctly as well, like you're not homing attacking to get this beetle, which is definitely the wrong thing to do if you can get across without it. So this kind of worked out quite nicely, this section. Alright, I definitely recommend just, I'm sure you've seen a lot of runners using the method where they land on this side rail. It is honestly safer than it appears because the rail is quite a bit wider than it appears, and this will give you less camera issues than what you're doing here, because if you like go up this way and just jump over, because you had quite a high jump and the camera is already in this spot, then the camera doesn't get stuck on the inside of the rail where you were. But if you just try and do a short hop to get over, the camera can quite easily get stuck on the yellow rail where you were before, and this makes this needlessly difficult. But you just avoid that altogether if you go to the right in the first place. So I'm going to go up and then use a short hop first, and I think I'm going to get the camera stuck if I do this. Yeah, like this. Like, that happens surprisingly consistently, and it just causes a lot of problems. Whereas, by contrast, you just won't have those problems if you just land on the rail here, just charge a spin dash, and just aim up like that. If you're worried about falling in the water, then just make sure you're getting enough of a spin dash charge. It's a little tricky, because if you want to get an optimal rocket platform, I don't think you really can use a full spin dash charge, but as long as you're not massively undercharging it, then, you know, you should make it like that. And then this gives you a super convenient spot to do that from as well. Because you can basically just hold B as soon as you land, or, because you don't have the bounce bracelet at this point, you can already be holding B here, just buffer the B input for when you land. And then when you're just running forward like this, it should come out when you're on this slope here, and you can pretty much just go from holding B to just basically doing a spin dash jump at this point with not much spin dash charge, and you should get all the height necessary to do it. I'm gonna see if I can just make it look clean in one attempt here. Yeah, it should just come out quite naturally like that. It's not exactly a 13 rocket platform that I've got there, but you can see from Sonic's shadow here that I am on the right spot. You can just do a spin dash. It's not necessary to do a spin dash hover at all. A spin dash hover is actually probably worse because of what I mentioned about if you have a full spin dash charge and land somewhere around here rather than further back here, then it's just going to be more difficult to be able to get the next spin dash in time when you're already on here. Because the idea behind the method I do it is that by the time I land, I'm already buffering the B input, so as I'm running forward, it's like the spin dash delay. And then by the time I reach this spot, the spin dash naturally comes out in that time. So that's not going to happen if you land further forward from doing a spin dash hover. And this is similar to what I said about in City Escape at the first staircase, that crossing over a vertex in ball form just makes you decelerate a lot. So while you can do this spin dash charge from the floor like this, it makes the jump actually a little harder than it needs to be, because once you cross over this vertex onto the steep slope, Sonic is already going a bit slower than you would anticipate, and so the jump is just a little more difficult than it needs to be. It's why you see a lot of people doing this spin dash charge from this slope vertex instead, rather than from the floor. Like, this can work, but I think it's a bit needlessly difficult. Like, you almost didn't have enough height for that, which is a bit weird to think, because if you like do it from the slope vertex itself, you get way more than enough height. And it's just because of like how much speed loss it causes. Okay, you wiggle around a lot here, and this actually causes you to, I think this causes you to miss the correct speed pad here. The middle speed pad here will give you the most speed, but it looks to me like you're hitting the right one here. So yeah, just wiggle as little as possible. Same as at City Escape, really. Just try not to use much stick input at all on the boarding sections if you can. I'm going to look at exactly what you're doing on the control stick here. Yeah, for the most part it is left and right input, but then you kind of went all over the place right at the end here on the control stick, and yeah, I don't know, it just seems a little unnecessary to me. This method for the loop skip certainly can work, and for doing the last loop skip you kind of just want to use a method that consistently works for you, so if that gives you consistent results, then I would stick with that.
Hey gamers, imagine having a Switch.
I agree. I have a Switch.
Can't believe MK is dead. This is so sad. Dude, I'd die if I saw
Okay, so
my
no
stream
spin dash
too,
method,
bro.
barely anyone uses this.
Dude, Shadow, what's wrong with you? Gay, bro?
Yeah,
Shadow, you
that
gay, bro?
that was not safe. That is absolutely not safe the way he did that there. For the shadow fight, you really do want to use a hit and run approach. Whenever you get a hit, you want to back off and then go back in for the next hit. So on the first hit, between hits 1 and 2, you really overdid the backing off and then approaching back towards him, which resulted in a slow hit. And then on the third hit, you didn't back off at all, and I'm surprised you actually didn't die. So let's have a look at this again.
Dude, I'd die if I saw my stream too, bro.
So, like, this motion isn't incorrect. Like, moving around in a circle like this isn't incorrect, but you are spending too long at this point running sideways, which causes you to, if I just slow this down, you'll be able to, like, see when his iframes end. Yeah, so he's solid that. So at this point, you can already have dealt the last hit. So in other words, before this point, you should have already been like going around, moving sideways, and then you should have like angled back in towards him for another storage hit.
Dude.
But then this was really confusing for me here, because like you try and stick to him like glue here, you have 0 rings.
Dude. Gay.
I can actually say here now, looking at this slow down, the only reason you didn't die here is because you had storage, because you were holding B. If you hadn't been holding B on the frame that he started his jump animation, you would have died there. Because of his jump hitting you. So, yeah. You really don't want to stick to him like that after dealing damage in that manner. Because, like I say, if he jumps, then you're just going to die. If you have 0 rings. Shit. Alright, this is about right.
Dude, Shadow, what's wrong with you? You gay, bro?
Yeah, just
Shadow, you gay,
try
bro?
not to stick to him like that.
Bro, I think Shadow's gay, bro.
It doesn't really affect
Shadow,
the fight whether he jumps
sorry
or
about your
not.
work.
I mean, if you watch my strat, then he pretty much never does jump after the
bye,
first hit.
gamer.
It's part of the
This is
reason
so
why I
sad.
prefer my spin dash hit, because you don't really risk getting a high jump with it.
I'm so
Anyway.
bad at this pausing, resetting, blah blah blah. See, look, is it even worth it? It's not. Stop that. You
Okay,
stupid
so
idiot.
going for the IGT time save here, like, that's fine, but it was 0.29, so that saved about half a second after all is said and done. It's debatable whether it's worth going for the light dash here. Some runners choose to do it, some choose not to do it. I personally choose not to do it, getting this light dash. And the position that he had after coming over this hill just looked very janky also. I'm not entirely sure how that happened, but yeah, you really just want to try and be central going down here, if possible. And it's part of the reason why I don't go for the light dash there, so I'm just fully in control of my own path. So when I do it, it just hopefully looks something like this. So holding B already so I don't get the light dash, and then I pretty much just am holding straight up, and it just gives me a pretty straight path through there. This is okay though. Whoa, okay, you had a pretty nice position here for just utilizing the spin dash storage, but then you just stopped holding B, and you decided to homing attack when you landed instead. You should have just continued holding B here. Because if we rewind this, so from the B input here, where you get the light dash here, I just continue to hold this B input. So the B input is pressed down, and from this point on, I just continue to hold it through here, through here, through here, through here, and I continue to hold it, and then the spin dash just naturally comes out here. Because it honestly just does maintain the spin dash storage for that whole thing. Let's go back to my feed, and like if you're paying attention for it, you'll be able to like see what I mean. Because when I get off the well, first of all, I've got the checkpoint here, so I just may as well. So I'm gonna use my B input right before I hit the spring, so that I've got virtually no spin dash storage. There's virtually no duration here. So when I got off the vine there, you can see that there was a distinct delay before my spin dash came out. And now if I let this go going straight up, then I almost hit that enemy. Just as an example of where the position's a bit different. But if I do it from the light dash, like I'm just going to do the light dash and continue to hold the B input. Alright, let's do it with a bit of a run up to conserve a bit more speed. So I'm continuing to hold my B input, and I'm going to hold right again. And I apparently had a little too much duration. Okay, let's try and get this one more time. Struggling to... It's the camera. It's the camera that's the problem here. I'm just going to restart from the start of the stage, because I'm starting from a different camera mode, and it's messing with my inputs. So again, from this point onwards, just again pay attention to the spin dash delay. So I've definitely got the storage here, so I'm just going to continue to hold right, and I'm going to get the spin dash as soon as I get off the vine here. See that? Like, as soon as I get off the vine. So that's like about as fast as it can be. And then you can just chain 2 spin dashes like that, and once you get over this hill, at about this point, you can just hold B to start charging your next spin dash for the next spin dash storage. And I should, again, have another spin dash as soon as I get off this vine. Like that. So 2 spin dash storages that are very reliable there. So yeah, like, in other words, the second spin dash storage here didn't happen because you just maintained this ball form into the spring. Like, you should have unrolled long before this and started charging the next spin dash to get the full benefit of the spin dash storage there. Because as it is there's the long delay there before the next one came out. Yeah, this hill's a little awkward, and the way that I try to mitigate this is just zigzagging a little. Like, I try and emphasize having the straightest movement possible, but this hill is one point where I actually just deliberately zigzag quite a lot just to try and stick Sonic to the floor. Because you just continue to hold straight up there, which is like, it's good movement, quote unquote, but that hill really likes to misbehave if you don't finagle with it a lot. If you are going to go for this first loop skip, because this is quite reasonable to go for, you just want to jump over the speed pads. Like these speed pads here, you just need to jump over them, because these speed pads are going to lock your controls. It's going to be the same thing in Pyramid Cave, so it'll be interesting to see if I have to commentate on that. But yeah, jump over them. And this is what lets you retain full control of Sonic in this sort of spot. Like, I'm able to move around freely, whereas if I hit the speed pads, then I do not have control of Sonic until I jump. But as long as you're grounded, then that's a relatively simple maneuver. You just need to make sure that you're using enough rightwards input on the control stick so that you don't get stuck on the inside of the loop. That's the main thing that prevents that from working. Okay. I think you actually had the neutral vertex here, but this is really hard to recognize in the moment. But this looked to me like you had the neutral vertex, so you could have just done a neutral spin dash charge. Like, this looks to me like Sonic is on the neutral vertex. But if I was in the moment, I might have played this the same way, where I'm continuing to hold the control stick angle. And this is like, being at this point is like the next best vertex to be on, in my opinion. Like, even though Sonic rapidly changes between these two vertexes, it doesn't honestly seem to lose much time at all, and you still seem to go down this slope very fast at this spot. Two good spin dash storages together probably collectively saves a couple of seconds. It's not a huge amount of time, but if it's there for free, it's like you may as well take it.
Top spring, let's go.
Okay, I'll run this back a bit. So if you're not going to go for the checkpoint, and if you're not going to go for wall run, you don't really need to jump here. You can first, instead, when you're approaching this spot, like, rather than jumping over the speed pad here, you can just go to the right here and then level out to go upwards, again, just to maintain a bit of ground speed. Because of jumping there, you're going a little slower here than you could be. But getting the spin dash jump on the slope there, I do agree with that, because it gives you more air, and it makes this gap considerably easier to cross over. So I don't have the neutral vertex there, and yeah, Sonic was janking around a lot there. So I'm going to try and do what I said about not jumping or being anywhere near the speed pad here. Yeah, if you can do something like that, then that's about as fast as that's going to come out. Nice. Got all the Sonic after images there. I think it looks nice. This is nice. I'm not sure whether, again, this is something you are deliberately going for, but this is actually the best setup for getting the good storage across that trail of rings as you're going up the tree. That if you get what I call the neutral light dash here, where if you're directly behind this trail of rings when you light dash, you can see if I slow this down, it just looks like Sonic goes straight through them very smoothly without janking around left and right. So Sonic just goes through them in a very straight line. And from this point, if you just continue to hold up on the control stick and hold B, like continue to hold B from doing the light dash, which you do here, then you'll always hit this spring in that specific position. And that position is the correct spot to get this good light dash going up here. Like, that is actually the setup that you're meant to use there if you can. So if you can consistently do what you did there, that is the best way to get that light dash. Yeah, this has happened to me by accident as well. For this specific spot, you just want to delay when you use the B input. Like, you got to remember that as far as charging the spin dash, you're not going to be able to start charging it until you're grounded anyway. So there's no need to hold B when you're near these rings. Like, you can just hold B once you're even grounded again. Just don't do it when you're midair like that. Or alternatively, do it before you reach that point. Like, just don't do it around those rings, basically. Using L to reset the camera, nice. The positioning here was a little awkward, but this is partly because you're starting a bit further back than I would. Like, if you had had a really clean bungee skip and ended in the quote-unquote right spot, you probably would have been lined up in the right spot to be able to do the next loop skip without stopping. But, like, since you're landing around here, like, near the edge, then you know, spin dash, and then you were a little too far back on this next spin dash, so you need to like hold it longer to get more of a spin dash charge. Whereas if I just play it through, I'm going to try and get a super clean bungee skip, which should land me further forward, and it should put me in a good spot to just chain a couple of spin dashes, and to be able to do that this motion that you're doing now without pretty much stopping much at all. Okay, my angle was wrong there to clip the overloop there, but you can see that I was in pretty much the right spot. Like, I ended up in pretty much this spot, which is pretty much exactly where you want to be for this. And that is going to kill me, yeah. So the same thing here as in Metal Harbor, that if you're going to go for loop speed here, you do need to make sure that you're through the loop before you do it. Because if you like do it from around here, then the loop speed trigger is just going to shoot you down into the water. Whereas if you make sure you're through the loop before you do it, then you'll be a lot safer. It looks to me like you've got too much... Yeah, you had too much air there anyway. This trick is kind of tricky, clues in the name, because you do need to take the straightest path possible to be able to get enough distance to get the actual loop speed on the other side. Otherwise, you need to take the recovery homing attack as you have here. But if you angle too far up, then you get what happened to me as I approached this the first time, which is you like clip the overhang, and it either completely stops your progress or it just removes your homing attack and makes you maintain skewed gravity, and that actually kills you if that happens. So getting this last loop skip is something that is well worth practicing to be able to get the optimal one and get the loop speed at the other side.
Yo, bro, Sonic, nice job completely missing that spring. Well, that light dash.
And you can optimize the very end of this, like, hopefully saving a couple of tenths-ish, if you want to, by spin dashing on that last straight. It's a lot more difficult for me to get this on this far because I have the bounce bracelet. Again, I can't buffer B while I'm in the air, but I'm going to like try for it. So you can just, once you land here, run a bit forward like this, jump, do a short hop at around this spot to hopefully get grounded as soon as possible here. And while you're already in midair here, you can just use a B input, start holding B to buffer a spin dash here, and you can just spin dash and then jump and homing attack this spring, hopefully. It's considerably harder to do in New Game Plus though with the bounce bracelet because I need to wait until I'm grounded before holding B. Like that. And I was like, yeah, too far forward because of needing to delay my B input. You can see the idea that I was going for though. It's a very slight optimization though, so if you're not confident in doing it, it's definitely not a high priority.
Stages are on point, right? I know. Just been bosses.
Alright.
It's epic. Oh god, I hope I don't PB because my PB review is with Draco.
Pumpkins.
My bosses are bad. He's gonna.
I would definitely say there's no need to jump in the air and hit the balloon like this. This is just a lot slower than what you can easily get by going on the lower path. Like you can pretty much just hold up, do a short jump and glide to land here, and just punch and run like that. That is quite easy to perform. You need to go like a little bit to the right, as you can see there, but from that point you can just hold up. And that works fairly reliably, and it's considerably faster than what you had there. Okay, right and left. I'd go around the other side for this. Yeah, because you're Yeah, just coming around full circle, basically. So just go around the right side rather than the left side for that. Sleep when you're dead. And so you can tell which one this is based on what the radar is doing at the top of the rocket. So since this is green, it means it's this one. If it's yellow at the top of the rocket, then it means it's this one. Yeah, so there you go. And Scarecrow Brothers. Weird pieces. And yeah, this is awkward to grab in one. But not bad. 43 is pretty average.
Beat balls about. My strat is legal, Paul.
Again, weird movement here. This is kind of an in-between thing where it's like you were kind of at this point going for one of the two main methods of moving through this section, which is to avoid these cars and just try and take the straight path by just going like this. But then once the camera pan happened, you just turn very aggressively to the right here, and yeah, then you like hit multiple cars. This actually loses quite a bit of time. I'm expecting to see a fair bit of time loss when you actually reach the upgrade relative to what you can normally get. And jumping there to avoid the boxes, like, yeah, there's just a lot of unnecessary movement happening here. Left side is faster if you can make it work, though. Yeah, like a 23.5 here. That was just, like I say, the main thing that I'm noticing here is just a lot of unnecessary stuff happening. If I try and compare it with Start of My Own, that's always the wrong stage. So I try and take a very direct route at the start here, first of all, like this, and just shooting the cars out of the way. And I'm just trying to turn as minimally as possible. Like, I'm already moving in the direction that I want to be here. Just go around with no jumps, and just break the boxes. There's no need to, like, jump here. To be fair, I go around the right side here, so this is a bit slower, but I am going to end up faster than what you had at the upgrade. Like, 22.5 here, so this is, like, a second faster than what was displayed in the PB just now for reaching the upgrade. And that was with me going around the right-hand side on the collapsing platform, which is in itself a bit slower. So yeah, you get a little less mileage out of this IGT abuse. But that looks about right still, the amount of time you're squeezing. The timing there is pretty good for doing the hover here. I always wait for, obviously you want to wait for the weight to collapse, but then I do the pause as soon as I can see the weight starting to rise off the ground. Which is about what you see here, like you've pretty much reacted to it starting to rise off the ground and then you do the pause hover. That's exactly what I do.
I have no idea how that made it. That was a terrible pause hover.
Okay, going really early here, using pause hovers here, but yeah, you're comfortably making that.
Oh, we're getting cool cycle right now. This is so free.
So this is the point of the stage where you actually need to start moving well to meet zero cycle. Like everything from this point onwards, quote unquote, matters. So this is where I'm going to be looking at stuff a little bit more analytically.
This is so epic.
So, first of all, this looks like you did a stationary jump from this platform, which is, you know, a little slower. There's a few things like coming into effect here. I've got like a few different things to talk about here. So my timing generally for when to go here is when like the edge of this platform lines up with this point here.
This is so epic.
So at this point I'm already moving. But as I mentioned, you did a stationary jump here, so I normally would start around this spot you are, but once it reaches this spot, I just move forward instead, and then once Tails is closer to the wall, then I do a hover jump. The idea being that I'm going to do a hover jump with some forward momentum, and the platform's going to be a little higher by the time I actually do the hover jump, so that once Tails rises up like this, you can see that Tails does kind of like collide with the ground here and start walking, but if you already have some more forward momentum, you can start with a bit more of a forward boost. And if you want to meet zero cycle, it's really worth trying to pull together as many optimizations as you can, so that if a little mistake happens on the way to zero cycle, it's not necessarily going to kill being able to meet the cycle.
Not gonna zero cycle though. Can I get a like?
So, I don't disagree with this method here. Like, I see a lot of people either jumping over this corner here to avoid the cop car, But ramming through the cop car really doesn't make much of a difference, because as you can see here, it honestly doesn't slow Tails down at all. And you can still make it over the cages with this hover jump. The hover jump here is also coming out at approximately the right time. Like, I've seen people do the hover jump against the cages, and that just completely cuts your forward momentum. That's totally wrong. Whereas this is much more of the correct way to take this hover jump. Because, yeah, you've got a lot of distance, so you approach the cages with full momentum, and now Tails is still moving quite fast. So that avoids some potential time loss. I think you were probably just scared of hitting the enemy here, but you were honestly lined up pretty much correctly to hit the enemy. Like, once you get through these pillars here, since you're aiming straight up, as long as you just fire some shots rhythmically, it's very unlikely that they're going to miss the enemy. Like, you fired a few good shots. Somehow it was, like, still intact for a while, but, like, 9 times out of 10 you're going to get the enemy fairly easily. And even if you run into the enemy, as long as your movement up until that point was, like, really good, and as long as the rest of your movement after that point is good, you can actually still afford to run into the enemy and still get 0 cycle. I don't really recommend landing on the zipper under the bridge in the way that you did here, which is to say, like, at this point you just went straight forward onto it. Like, I always say that you should land on the orange girder here and walk onto the speed pad, but ideally you want to continue to move up left and try and hit it like at this point. It seems silly, but if you walk onto it at the wrong spot, then this can cause you to get a bad collision with the fence here, and you can actually not clear the fence. This can actually kill you. If you can break the box as you're approaching, this will be a big help, because there is also a backup that you can do here to get a quick box break after the weights come down, but you haven't performed it here, so at this point this is losing time, and this is probably going to make 0 cycle difficult to me, but we'll see how it goes. Yeah, 0 cycle is difficult now, and there's also a suboptimal setup for this jump here, so I'll be a bit surprised if you get 0 cycle now. Yeah, that's not happening. Yeah, it's half cycle. So everything was actually pretty good up until this point, where the weight comes down, so both getting onto the weight and getting off the weight are the 2 things that you can improve for hitting 0 cycle. Everything else looks to me like more than good enough for making 0 cycle. It's just these 2 things that can be quite a bit better. I'm just going to play through stage myself. No scope. So you see what I mean there about running forwards and then doing a hover jump, and it looks like Tails starts moving with a little bit more speed than you might expect. I just prefer to jump there, but airspeed is a little slower, so I don't really think it's substantially faster, and like I say, this is just about meeting the cycle as well. So let me just get the enemies out of the way. So point number 1, when approaching here, the optimal thing that you can do is, once you're at this point, face up right and just jump and shoot to get the box, to ideally get it before you even reach the weights. If you don't manage to get that off though, then what you can do is run forwards into the weights, immediately do a pivot turn out of them, and then once you pivot turn, just jump to the right and shoot. And it should hopefully look something like this. Like that. That's the quickest way you can do that as a backup. So that's for getting on the weight, and as far as getting off the weight, once you're on the weight like this, you want to wait here at the back end. Like, waiting halfway across, this just makes it more difficult than necessary, because again, once you actually reach the end of the platform to do a hover jump, you're going to have less momentum than you can have. You're going to be having less speed. So you want to wait here, and as you rise, the camera is going to like do a little bit of a change. Like, you can see that now the camera is staying in place. So at this point I can just hold left, and once it looks like Tails is going to reach the end of the platform, I just do a normal hover jump. And this is like the correct timing and height, so that a good hover jump will just about get me across with good speed. Like that. You can see that I'm like barely making it there. So if I start from the checkpoint, then you should hopefully like see the effect that it has. So that's like a major mistake, quote unquote, getting completely stopped there. So if everything else is like perfect, I think I should still make the cycle. So I got the backup. I'm still getting the cycle here. It's like, starting from the checkpoint, it's not quite the same, but you can see the general idea. So by comparison, you can see like just how much longer it takes for the weight to start going up there if you're taking longer to hit the switch.
Yeah, I've never zero cycled in my life. It's kind of sad, actually.
Well, just remember what I said about both getting on the weight and getting off the weight then, because like I say, the rest of the stage up to that point was actually more than good enough to make zero cycle. It's just the weight, really. That's honestly the way it is for a lot of runners. Oh, that's dangerous.
Now if I'm dead, I'm gonna be really sad.
It's not a death, but that was risky. The sad thing here as well is that you really don't need a pause hover to make this. Like, it's really unnecessary to do a pause hover here. You can just do a regular hover jump and this will work. Like, you can see how much of a delay there was there between my jump input and my hover input. It really doesn't need to be a massive pause hover and you'll still make it. You just need to make sure you don't miss the hover input. That's the most important thing. And once you get to this point, I can already see on your game feed you're shooting. You really don't want to do that. Just don't shoot at all. And the jet won't drop bombs on you. And the bomb robot behind you, its shots won't catch up with you. So that's just zero risk for that section.
Mind, I'm happy.
So yeah, like taking the shot there, just unnecessary. Don't risk that.
So apparently I don't even need a pause hover. I don't even need a good hover. That's
Yes, correct. Okay, movement for this last corridor. Movement for this last corridor. First of all, I'm just going to get the enemies out of the way. So, like, you jump through this gap because, presumably you just worry about getting through this gap in one piece, which it is a difficult spot. But there is a pretty consistent way to approach this. For this first set of boxes, you can, as you found, just hug the wall, and it will generally work. But if you continue to do that for the second set of boxes where you just hug the wall, it's basically random whether you'll get through easily. Like, you can see there that I bonked. Bonked again. Bonked again. Bonked again. So this is not a reliable method for getting through, clean at least. Whereas what you can do instead is, once you get through here, if you like angle tails further towards the center like this, and then if at this point you start angling back towards the wall, so you're taking a bit of a wide arc towards it, then you will actually get through fairly reliably. It sounds silly, but this honestly does work. See that? How tails just goes through with no problem? So there is no jump necessary here, you just need to change your approach angle slightly. And tails will go through fairly easily. One more. See, it's consistent. So just aim a little bit more towards the center of the road and then take an arc back towards the wall, and as long as it's in the right position, tails will actually slip through there with no problem.
I enjoy the fact I don't even need a good hover there, but you bet I'm still gonna pause hover just in case.
There's no reason at this point that you can't be aiming in this direction and just shooting a lot of bullets in this direction to get the yellow taxi out of the way. Pretty much from this point onwards, I'm shooting almost continually just to get all the obstacles out of the way. Because, I mean, if you can take this path and run where the yellow car is, obviously that's a bit more of a direct path.
I'll pause hover just in case.
And then you don't need to take such an aggressive turn as well.
This is a fat fucking gold, bro.
So, yeah, just to compare. So like I say, I'm just aiming in this direction. And you can just keep shooting, and like, there's no way you're not going to hit the yellow car there. And then just try and take the straightest path that you can by shooting everything out of the way. And you're home free.
Bro.
213 for a half cycle isn't too bad though.
So epic. Too bad I'm good. This legal.
Alright, aquatic mine. So let's have a look at all the possible free piece checks. So
Please, free.
first piece isn't here.
Please.
Since you're on 16.9, this free piece check is considerably easier. Like, you can still perform this free piece check on 4.3, but it's a lot more difficult. And you don't have the one here either.
Please.
And you don't have the one here.
Please.
And you don't have the ones here or here. So there's no free pieces in the cutscene.
Please. Fuck.
And yeah, so this is actually a bit of a contentious thing. This is an IGT strat to reload the stage and to keep checking the cutscene for free pieces. I personally don't really agree with this because, I mean, if your restarts are good, then it costs like a frame to do it each time, but there's never a guarantee that you're going to have, you know, a free piece. You could potentially be here the whole time and it just looks ridiculous. Currently, it is quote-unquote legal to do in Hero Story, but that is potentially not always going to be the case because we in the moderator team are actually currently discussing whether to ban this or not. So, yeah, just be aware of that. That if you're relying on this, this may not remain a legal trick, so don't get dependent on this. We are thinking of whether we should ban this or not, because it's just a bit ridiculous. Yeah, like I mentioned before about how the IGT and RTA times were further apart than normal in this run, and I know for a fact that this is why it is. Like, I knew in advance that this is something that features in this particular player's gameplay. And like I say, currently it's a permitted strat, but could see a rule change saying that this is not allowed in future, and yeah, there's the free piece.
Lol. Free lol. If this set is
and then you just go for it at the start, which this is debatable. I personally prefer to just go for the water level first. I think going for the water level is just always the first thing you should do in Aquatic Mine, especially in a story run, because you have control of Knuckles sooner. By that I mean, this is another thing that I've had to say in virtually all of the analyses I've done so far. The majority of people's Knuckles practice and gameplay is going to be through stage select. And when you go into Aquatic Mine through stage select, you don't have control of Knuckles as the stage loads. Like, you can see that until Knuckles was like on the ground and the stage properly loaded and the timer started, I wasn't able to control him, and it's the same thing here. So there's a bit of a delay. Whereas if you go into... Shit, didn't mean to do that. Yeah, you can't pause until like 1.8. So if you go instead into story mode, we've conveniently got a scene that starts on Aquatic Mine, and you actually have control of Knuckles as soon as the stage starts, like as soon as he starts dropping, so you can move him a lot sooner. You may as well just utilize that to get a instant excel and just go for water level 3, like this. And then, you know, at this point you can come down, and this piece is still going to be here, so then you can just go for it like this. And then this is like your second hint after getting that. That's what I would recommend at least. Brutal. Yeah, not seriously. Yeah, just... Interesting. Oh, dying. Okay,
this is improvisation.
Interesting strat.
I've been away for a while.
Yeah, I wouldn't, again, I wouldn't necessarily go for the hint there before going up and getting the water level. The weird thing is as well, like, with where you died on the enemy there at the bottom, you're already basically like halfway to the piece anyway. So this isn't even, like, after all things said and done, this isn't even, like, significantly faster at this point. If faster at all. Oh, you almost got the hint clip. Nice. Yeah, if you know how to do that, and if you've done it before, that's definitely something you should go for. It just looked like getting the spiral input was a problem there. And narrow path movement in general is just really janky here from what I'm seeing. I want to see again how you actually entered narrow path and moved towards this piece.
Losing time here, which is quite unepic, but still.
Yeah, this movement in general is just quite unrefined. So, the best way that you can get into narrow path is to... I mean, you did the start right, like, coming around here. But what you want to do is punch off this edge. I'm going to get this mic out of the way. Because rather than jumping and gliding and risking latching onto walls everywhere like this and having camera issues, all sorts of issues like that, you can avoid that altogether by just punching off the edge, like that. And it's faster as well than jumping and gliding. It also puts you in the position, because you're going to land around here, it puts you in the position to then just punch up this slope, which is again faster than jumping and gliding repeatedly, like I see people doing like this. So when you enter a narrow path from the outside like this, it typically ends up just looking something like this when executed well. Like, that's just really quick and simple. That's the way that you should always be handling entering the narrow path. Yeah, slopes are tricky. Just like with Tails, spend as much time with Knuckles on the ground as you can manage.
Camera, please.
And yeah,
please,
camera's awkward.
So
So if you're going for a piece that's around this spot at the entrance, then rather than end up in the middle of the room after you clip, what you can instead do is just clip into the entrance area, and the camera typically follows you a lot better when you do that as well. So if I just aim the camera like this for a normal clip, and if I clip and I just continue to hold up and A, then I should land in the entrance area. Or near enough, like I ended up under the pillar like this, but you can see that you end fairly close to it. So you can then add a little bit of right to your control stick, and you should be like right at the entrance. Like this. Like you just clip right into there and the camera follows you immediately. But ending up in the middle of the room like that should only really happen either if the camera isn't tilted enough or if you are using up on the control stick. So I'm going to play it back a little bit and see what the input cam said. Yeah, you were actually just using straight up, so... And the camera was fairly far tilted here, so really just up with a little bit of right probably would have worked more effectively here. Alright, R101.
I think the only piece what I'm going to take from now on...
Just taking sharper turns already is something that you should be paying attention to. Like, the sharper you can take these turns, the more inside of the corners you can manage, obviously the better you're going to manage. And there was no real reason to use the boost in that spot where you did there, and yeah, this is... I'm not entirely sure what this boost route is. If you've already got a boost stored, like, it does nothing to then go for the balloon and try and get another one, which, if you then do unnecessary sharp cornering, it's just going to lose time. So the result of that is you got like a 38.86 lap 1, which is, compared to like top play, that's like a second slower than what you can get on that lap. And it's a very simplistic lap as well. Yeah, from what I'm seeing, it's just like the cornering is a little sloppy here.
Can't believe Drywall is dead, guys. Can't believe I hit that balloon.
You really don't need to emulate Geek's route to have a clean time through Route 101. Route 1 is actually quite a simplistic stage to just get a respectable time in, like a 2:15 or better. It's just, again, a case of what I mentioned before about there's a lot of just unnecessary stuff happening here. Like, it's as though you're just making the stage more complicated than it needs to be. Like, when you're just driving normally, you can just try and keep your turns as tight and compact as possible. You barely need to turn at all to maintain the drift state. And then it's just finding the correct timings for taking the actual corners. Which, I mean, you kind of just have to practice and feel it out, but there are, like, significant improvements to be had here. And of course, since it's Route 101, when I say significant improvements, I mean this can be like a couple of seconds faster. Like, it's nothing catastrophic. It's just this is looking like it's going to be something like a 217, 218. And by contrast at this spot, it's like I mentioned before that you were using boosts unnecessarily because you were already at max speed, but then there's this spot where you've just done this uphill, so you're currently not at max speed, and then you are just holding onto this boost when it doesn't really help. Like, you're already below max speed and you just hold onto it until the top of this hill. But since the time between getting to the top of the hill and getting to this balloon is lower than the time of when you held the boost before, it's just losing more time than it saves to do that, basically, because the distance is different.
This is like a 218, which is not bad by my standards. Not at all.
It's 217 actually.
217 even. This
yeah, there you go. So like I say, I'm kind of like, it sounds like I'm really shitting on that Route 101, but it's just because there's a lot of really wide cornering going on there, and that could basically be a 215 without too much difficulty, just if the cornering in general was sharper and the boost route was a little more refined. So like, that's almost like really well put together. The path that you took here just looked a little wide to me. Yeah, like you move forward to this point and then you started moving right here. Whereas typically when I play this stage, I like drop down here and I'm already moving to the right at this spot, so I'm just taking a more direct path like this. And the result of this is that when you reach this spot, you're almost facing exactly right here. So there's almost no way to then turn back to the left without losing all your speed. And that directly happened here, plus you're stopping to get these lock-ons. So there's just a couple of things going on here. I'm going to bring my game back here. Ideally, for the start of Hidden Base, you really want to take this section without stopping, if you can help it. Just like that. That is about the best that you can hope to get away with there. It's a little more difficult than it looks, because there's a couple of different elements in play here. First of all, that you need to get these 3 lock-ons, and if you're in the wrong position, such as if you're here, that's not going to happen. The lock-ons in this game are really weird, and they don't care about your line of sight, they only care about your relative position towards the current target. Like you can see, even here, I was barely able to get it. Whereas if I go back any more, it's like, it just doesn't want me to get it. And then if I go more left, then it finally lets me get it. So if you're just in the wrong spot, it's really not going to work. Which is why I try not to get into a similar position here where I'm facing more to the right here, and then I need to angle more left, because that's when you can end up in spots like this where you have difficulty even getting that lock on. Ideally, instead, you just want to land somewhere around here, hopefully without hitting that metal box, and then you can just, as long as you have a little bit of leftwards direction to get that third lock on, then you can pretty much just go without stopping, and it shouldn't be too much of a problem there. I'm not entirely sure why you stopped here. Oh, if you're scared of not getting this door in time, then you can just be shooting earlier. Like, whilst you're hover jumping across here, there's no reason why you can't be shooting at the same time. Like, you can already have one of the shots on the door at this point. And then you can just continue to approach the door without stopping at all. Just like this. Like, it shouldn't be too much of a problem to get that door without stopping. Okay, so running with an axle jump. If you're going to go for axle jump, though, I would recommend doing it as early as possible, like right here. Just go over the fence here and take a more direct path, rather than moving down like this and then turning to the right here. I think it's a bit better to take a more direct path here, personally. As far as when you can land down, the general rule of thumb is that once your target has passed off the bottom of the screen, so you can see like this white marker here is the first opportunity you have to land. Once this goes off screen, you can just stop hovering and you should land right around there. Like, you won't really risk dropping too early and falling into the sand. So at this point, you can just be dropping. So you wait a little longer there and you can see that there is a bit of space between you and the start of the platform there. The same sort of rule applies if I take the quote-unquote correct route for the axle jump that I mentioned, hover jumping over as soon as possible. And I need to use a bit of camera control here as well, so I tap the camera button to force free cam here. And this makes it so that I can see what's underneath tails. So I'm going to be doing the same thing again, where once this corner goes off the bottom of the screen, I'm just going to drop down and I'm going to be able to land safely. Just like that. And then stage just progresses as normal.
This is on Epic.
Let's just look at how this happened here, getting off the pulley. You can maybe go like a little earlier off the pulley, but you didn't wait until the pulley was all the way at the top either, so it was a decent enough pulley release. But I think you can afford to go slightly earlier here as long as your movement is straight.
This is on Epic. I lied, it was Epic.
And again, if you can just have as much ground time as you can without holding long hover jumps, then you'll save bits and pieces of time as tails, which across the course of the stage is going to add up to seconds. Like, there's just a lot of unnecessary airtime happening here. I'll just try and compare again, and hopefully you should be able to see the difference here. So I'm just trying to have as much time on the ground there as possible, spend as little time in the air, and that does add up to more time across the stage than you would perhaps first imagine. Okay, this wasn't too bad. Don't hit the wall. Okay. No, you had enough height to do that. You could have committed to that. It looks to me like you were going to make this. Like, it's maybe close, but I think you would have made this if you went for it. It's, I don't know, it's hard to tell. Maybe as if you had fully committed to it and had a bit of a straighter path, then if you didn't have the height before, that might have given you the height. It's a bit hard to say. And same thing again here with doing a full hover jump here. Rather than doing a hover jump here, I would just use a couple of short hops to ascend these platforms individually. I think it's a little better, personally. As far as when you can release off this pulley here, like this one, I personally use an audio cue where now that you're going up, you pass this trail of rings, and pretty much on the 4th ring collection sound, I just do my hover jump. You do it like a little later, and you still end up in basically the right place, but you'll be able to see what I mean, that we do it at around the same time, and you end up in about the same place that I do. So just listen for the ring sounds, and when you do the hover jump here. Let's see if we can compare this again. Doesn't matter, I have the blaster. Okay, so it's missed. That's fine. So I'm going to try and do my hover jump on the 4th ring collection sound. And yeah, ends up in about the same place. And then I even got the optimal door break. That's very, very difficult to get. That was still a fairly decent door break, but as you saw me like doing on the footage there, you can potentially at this point be angled a little towards the door and try and get your first shot at this point. It's really difficult though. So yeah, this is like worth doing if you want to go for it, but it's not something to really sweat over. It's a minor time save if you can get it. so that you don't have to slow down or get stopped by the door before progressing there. If you want to go for this little strat here that you've probably seen top level runners doing, where you just go for the spring here, it is about a second faster, but it's considerably trickier than it looks. There's a couple of things that go into getting this. I'm just going to get these enemies out of the way. So first of all, you need to time when to do the hover, because if I hit the spring and just hold A after hitting the spring, then it doesn't do a hover input. You actually need to time when to do the hover. So obviously if you mash A, that doesn't really help either, because, you know, problems. So you need to time when to actually start hovering at the peak of the jump as early as possible, and you also need to be firing towards the door before you reach it. So you need to shoot the door 3 times before you reach it, and time when to do the hover. But if you can do both of those, this is about a second faster than what you do here, and this is the strat that I currently use in runs as well, just jumping over like this from the right side. But if you can use the spring method, it is about a second faster. It's just you have problems with the upward momentum causing your shots to just really miss. That's the thing that I struggle with most. It's a tricky strat. Yeah, because of the difficulty of actually getting this jump, doing the jump off this door, I actually think this is extremely difficult if you don't use a pause hover. So if you're not going to pause hover this, you should just use this corner instead, which I think is considerably easier to work around. You can just wait for this smoke particle effect when you're over the corner, and then you can just turn to the left and do another hover jump, and it's considerably easier than using the door in my opinion. Again, as much ground time as you can. Don't spend unnecessary time in the air if you can help it. Just run along the ground there. You can afford to go a little bit earlier here, because as soon as you see the pulley pulling you up, like at this point, you can already have done the hover jump. Whereas if you pay attention here, there's quite a bit of time between the pulley starting to go up and you releasing from the pulley. So that can probably be just like a free half a second there. And same thing here, you can just go as soon as that pulley lets you get high enough, because as long as you have enough leftwards input, you'll avoid that enemy without ever contacting it. I'll just play my section of the stage here. Again, land as soon as you can, just run towards the door. Get off this as soon as possible. And again, and there's no need to hit the enemy. Nice box break, I like that. Getting these enemies out of the way, like, I don't know if this was a safety measure, but you don't really need to worry about these enemies as long as you're using the fast route. Which is to say, if you just continue on in this direction and hover jump like this, then as long as you stay on the left-hand side of this platform, you're not going to hit these enemies anyway. I personally think going hard right like this to get on top of here is a bit unnecessarily safe. I mean, if you really struggle with the hover jump, then it's obviously better than falling in the sand and dying. But this isn't a particularly demanding hover jump to make in the first place. To the point where, if you are just using the hard right method like you are here, it's actually not even a hover jump. You can just do it at the peak of your jump and it will work. Don't believe me? Lol. This literally isn't even a hover jump by definition. You can just do a casual style hover, the way the game expects casual players to play, which is to use a hover at the peak of the jump, and this will work. So, in other words, if you combine that with just having diagonal movement like this, it's considerably safer than you'd think. You just need to not completely choke the hover input, or get trapped on walls. But you can see the idea there. And it's the same thing here, that like that really doesn't need to be a pause hover jump. That's about as lenient as the previous one I showed, i.e. as long as you're just moving towards it and do a hover, you should get up there. As long as you move towards it with like any momentum. So just don't be afraid of that one or think you need a hover jump, a pause hover to make that, because odds are you really don't need a pause hover there. Getting over the invisible wall here where you currently are, this is actually the hardest hover jump of the lot. So if you find this one easy, then the others are even easier. If you can break into bounds sooner here and run along the fence, it is a bit faster. So let's hopefully show what I mean here. So we'll get the 2 lock-ons there. And I'm going to break in bounds here and run along this fence, and the fence actually boosts you along. Like, your movement speed is augmented by running along the fence. So, Tails' natural movement speed like this. And if I run along the fence, it's going to make me move a bit faster. Like, it's not much, but it is there. That's just me holding up left. Like, you'll be able to see that once I get past the fence, it's just going to push me very aggressively to the left. Like that. That's the direction that I was holding there. Oh yeah, going a little too far left there and causing a camera issue there. You just want to be going straight if you can help it. Again, you can go a lot earlier off that pulley as well.
Wow. Just got my all-time best hidden base ever.
155 is not too
Hey, Drum, what's up,
disrespectful
Nancy?
though.
I was too busy getting my just have breezy. Didn't do terribly on PC. Lol.
Can probably do this.
Didn't do terribly on PC. Lol.
Okay, looking at the input cam.
Didn't do terribly on PC. Lol.
So you start with a neutral input and then you go upright, which is like interesting. It's different from what I've seen people doing with just holding upright as soon as the stage loads. What I personally do is I actually use down left when the stage loads, and then I rotate clockwise to upright, which sounds weird, but it can get you either very close to or on the speed pad as you start and put you in quite a favourable position for just doing your first spin dash. Like that. So there's actually quite a lot of room for... I didn't even have my cam enabled. I'll just do it again. But you see that there? There's quite a lot of room for experimentation here. Okay, yeah, this corridor movement in general is a bit of a problem, but it's difficult to take these corridors properly. When in doubt, a good policy to maintain is just to try and go along these red parts. Like, if you don't really know what else to do, then trying to run along these red parts is generally a safe bet. Like, I'll start again, and you'll notice that I'm going to try to, like, stick around where the red parts of the floor are, and it hopefully shouldn't make me slow down too much. Lol. Thanks, Sonic. For that last one, it's like a little more awkward, but, you know, that got me a 12 check, so it wasn't awful. One more time. Yeah, you can see I'm getting 12 checks like that. If you need to spin dash more than once in the hallway, then that does indicate that you're losing a lot of speed somewhere. You shouldn't need to do more than the one initial spin dash, unless the game forces you to unroll from it, like vertexing you or causing you to leave the floor. Okay, not bad. This seemed very conservative, though, the way that you spin dash hovered over here. At least, oh, that wasn't even a spin dash hover. Oh, it kind of is a spin dash hover, actually. But you can definitely do this aiming up right. Like, as long as you're at the edge, you can definitely do this spin dash hover and aim for this point. You can, like, aim to land around here. I'll hopefully just demonstrate again here. Lol. Look at that movement. end up around here, and you can just go around there and land straight on the speed pads. As a very quick general demonstration of how the hover frames actually work, you hold A and that makes you ascend, and if you just tap A, you start going down very quickly. So if you just tap A, pause, and then hold A to apply the hover frames, now it makes Sonic look like he's just hovering in the air. And see how he descends a lot slower there, and again. And I'll try and get him to just stay totally in the air. There you go. That is what the hover frames do, and the hover frame value is 60 frames. Like, you have 60 hover frames that make you ascend, and that value resets to the full 60 every time you perform a jump. So, typically speaking, I just need to restart the stage again. So I need to do another spin dash there because the game unrolled me, and then again, so that's horrible. But on spin dash hovering specifically, the times when people aren't going to be able to successfully spin dash hover across here is when they've, for some reason, done a full jump and used all their hover frames. So currently I have no remaining hover frames, so if I attempt to do a spin dash hover here, I'm just not going to make it across. Or I barely make it across, but it's a lot closer than it should be. So if I'm, again, trying to maintain like an optimal angle, like going to the upright angle, then, you know, I'm just not making it at all. Whereas, as a quick comparison point, if I do basically the same thing again, where... Need to recover, thanks game. This free cam here is amazing. So if I do like a full jump here again, so again, I've currently got no hover frames, so you can just fix that at any point by just tapping jump. Now I have like 50 something hover frames because I've only tapped jump for a very short amount of time. So now if I do a spin dash hover in the same direction, I've got tons of hover frames and I make it over easily. So if in doubt, if you want to do a spin dash hover and you're just not sure whether you're going to have the frames for it, just tap A and you'll get almost all your hover frames back. And you'll easily make the next spin dash hover that you try and do.
Nice no light dash, idiot.
Yeah, so there's a couple of methods you can take this room. It's weird, like I see a lot of people getting this exact method that's used here where you go straight through the enemy and hit the spring. That doesn't seem to happen for me, and what I've started doing is just attacking the enemy and then doing a double bounce, which a lot of high level runners are doing. But if this method is consistent, then I'm not really going to disagree with it. If you can both do the movement in a couple of smooth arcs rather than jiggling the control stick around, because Sonic notably wiggles around quite a lot here, like a couple of times. If you can do that and have no delay between when you're chaining your spin dashes, because you charged the second spin dash basically long enough to have a full spin dash, you came to almost a complete stop. If you can combine both of that, then you're really onto a winner with the first door skip here. See if I can do it. Oh, I didn't get the double bounce, thank you. Lol. Oh, fun glitch here as well. If you storage into the spring, then that happens. Let's just do it normally then. So because of free cam, I interfered there, but you can see the idea that I was trying to go for there, that I was trying to make my movement from this point. Like, what are you supposed to do with this camera angle? I'll fix this. Thank you. So like from here I was just trying to do a smooth movement there, level out, and then super bounce against the wall. And my spin dash timing was like about correct as well, but the camera kind of screwed me up there. But ideally you just want to, you know, try and do something like that. God, free cam is such a shit fest in this part of the stage.
Barely made that.
Yeah, that's... Yep.
This is unepic.
Going back and getting on the rail if you can and do it quickly there, though, is still the correct thing to do. I'm not sure what that was, though. I need to look at this again.
Okay, so I'm losing time here, lol. This is
I
unepic.
do not know why you jumped here.
Okay, so I'm losing time here, lol.
Yeah, let me just make this part simpler for you. If you... May as well get the checkpoint. So you're just going along this rail. But if you just continue to hold B after you get off this rail, I mean, you'll have noticed that you just get the spin dash charge. So the spin dash charge is always going to come out around here. And if you then just angle it up right like that, after you've angled it, you can just let go of the control stick completely. Currently I'm on neutral stick, and when Sonic hits the wall, he'll just travel parallel to it, and he'll still have speed because I'm not using stick input. The comparison of that is if I continue to hold upright, like now I'm using upright input, then Sonic gets slowed down by running against the wall. So just once you get off this rail, you can just angle it upright and just go neutral stick, and Sonic will go down very easily like that. So, like, the route I don't disagree with, but the multiple bouncing, that is absolutely not faster. So just remember, pretend this is the first hallway again, and remember what I've said about if you can try and run along these red floor markings, that's generally speaking, not an incorrect thing to do. But you'll notice that in these spots, you are like more in the middle of the hallway, and it's really affecting your ability to maintain speed. So if I try and do that, I'm hopefully going to have a bit of a faster time going through. You know, it's not perfect, but it's doable. Kind of works. It's tricky though. I hate this game. Okay, so no snake skip, I'm seeing.
This is unepic.
That's going to be a somersault, yep, from having storage through the thing. Not entirely sure what I think of that. But this was okay for the route used. I've typically found here that once you dodge around here and get on the other side, for some reason, once you get past the midway point of this Eggman floor marker, like if you divide this into two halves, currently you're on the right-hand half, but if you cross over into the left-hand half, it gives you a much more favourable camera angle for when you go along this straight, and you want to try and spin dash onto this snake rail. Like, I'll try and show what I mean here. Please. Oh. Nice one, Sonic. Nice one, Sonic. Alright, so first of all, I'm just gonna not cross over onto the left-hand side, just try and take a straight path. And you can see that I have this, like, it's relatively straight, but I'm still, like, got a bit of an angle approach, and it can be a bit tricky to gauge. Whereas hopefully if I cross over onto the left side, it should give me more of a straight-on camera angle that's a bit easier to work with. Also, this section's really trolling me. Really trolling me. Come on, dude. I'm getting such a shitty free cam angle there. This time I'm going to cross furthermore onto the left. And I don't know, to me this looks like a much straighter camera angle. Not sure if I can, like, reset the camera to an awkward point here. Yeah, it's kind of a little unfavourable here again. But then, you know, if I go onto the left there, then this just looks to me a little easier to work with. Just an observation there.
Well, that's No, Sonic,
Yeah,
please.
just don't bounce. Just don't press B in the air. Obviously, I'm sure you know that's the cause of that.
That was actually super scary, AMA.
So what you should do in this section as
That
well
was-
is chaining spin dashes here is definitely correct, but you should do a bounce excel here before you start the spin dash chaining, so that you do the first one on this vertex for the same reason as I've mentioned in City Escape and Metal Harbor. So it just ends up looking something like this. And the three should come out very fluidly like that all at the right time to be able to do that specific maneuver.
It's actually super scary, AMA.
Oh yeah, I wouldn't try and...
I mean, it's no
Alright.
gold, but
So if you want to take this, like, more pedestrian route, this second loop skip can still be very manageable as long as you avoid these speed pads. Like, since you've ran through the speed pads here, not attempting to do the loop skip is the correct thing to do here. But if you had jumped over those speed pads, you can do this loop skip with no problem. Like, if I run through the speed pads and try and jump over, then I'm going to have the same thing that happens to every poor sap who tries this, where Sonic just hangs in the air, doesn't go anywhere, and then I'm very likely falling in the pit. Like, you get no fucking distance there, and it's just a difficult situation. Whereas by contrast, if you just jump over the speed pads, then it's no problem. You've got full control of Sonic. So the prime thing to remember there is just don't go through those speed pads, and you'll be able to just treat that like any other loop skip in the game. Like, it's that simple. It's a very simple maneuver as long as you just avoid the speed pads.
I mean, it's no gold, but I'm actually not losing time, so I'm happy with it. That was a really good hit and base.
Yeah,
Like,
generally
straight up, that was
speaking,
actually super
speed
accurate.
pads cause
Like, I know
movement
it's not a good
problems
frame
everywhere
rate,
because
but
they
it's
lock your controls.
insanely
First,
good.
I mean, when you're dealing with loops, you're dealing with loop speed triggers, so that gives you speed boosts in specific directions, but the speed pads as well, they lock your controls so that they force you to move in a specific direction. So those two things combined, that results in the first time I went through it and jumped, and Sonic just rose straight up in the air and couldn't go anywhere for a good deal of time. That's directly what causes that. So as long as you avoid the speed pads, you'll retain free control of Sonic.
Remember, these splits that I'm at are my 2615
Right.
splits.
Dead chamber.
So it's not like I'm actually behind or anything. In fact,
This is something that people don't generally agree with. I personally like to get the upgrade before I reset like this. But, I don't know. I personally prefer to get the upgrade before I take a reset like this. I do reset on yellow and black stripes, so I don't personally disagree with this restart, but if it was me, I would wait until I'd got the upgrade before I do this.
in fact, I should probably be quite a bit ahead, I think. Can you please?
Yeah, this is just really inefficient, I think, the way that you are doing the checks plus the hint grab, and it's just because you're not getting close enough to the hint. The way that I typically do this is to check and then hit the hourglass and then do it. Like, I check both of them, fly into the hourglass, and then get the hint. That's just the way that I like to do it. It's, of course, not a hard and fast rule, but that's just my preference.
Okay. I sure do.
Ugh, air movement. Corner climbing. Always corner climb when possible. This is a good opportunity to show the effect that it has in this specific spot. So when Knuckles is just faced with a sheer wall, you can just climb like this, and you have the climbing speed, which you may think is like, oh, you can't go faster than this. But if you climb against a corner like this, like if I climb up left here, you'll see that when Knuckles hits the wall, he starts moving upwards faster. And that's because the game can no longer apply the horizontal speed, so it simply adds it to the vertical speed. So if you climb against a wall like this, then you're going to ascend or descend faster than normal. Like, you can visibly see where I'm going to just use up input here and then I'm going to change it to up left input, you'll be able to visibly see when I change to up left. Like, Knuckles just starts going faster. That applies to just about every wall in the game. So if you can climb against a corner like that, you will universally save time everywhere with Knuckles. And also at the same time, you should be aiming to use the instant wall climb tech, where if you just glide into a wall and latch onto it, there's this short delay where Knuckles doesn't climb the wall for a couple of tenths of a second-ish. I don't know how many frames it is, but there's at least a few frames where Knuckles doesn't climb the wall. So latch onto the wall. And you can see there's a couple of pause buffers between where Knuckles starts climbing the wall. But if you let go of the glide just before you hit the wall, then hopefully if you do it correctly, Knuckles starts climbing the wall immediately. Okay, so I missed it there. And I got it there. And I got it there as well. So if you combine both of those together, then it like makes the difference between something like... It makes the difference between something like this and something like this, hopefully. Camera, please. Like, it doesn't look like much, but just, again, if you can apply that everywhere, then it adds up to quite a bit of time difference across the course of a run. Main thing to do. Okay, so it doesn't look like any free pieces. You really didn't need to rotate the camera that much to keep checking, because once you have a good view of where Merry-Go-Round and Angel's Ring are, you'll know if you've got them. Partly because they're draw distance related, that by the time you get in range to see them, that's when the games are going to spawn them, so you don't need to have a very maintained look towards them.
Knuckle, please.
Yeah, camera here is... Yeah, you need to make sure the camera's going to follow you through there. So trying to go around that corner as quick as possible isn't necessarily the best thing. This looks like a place where the bug used to be, yep. From the radar range.
Surprise.
So, like, if you want to, like, be super high-level Knuckles Death Strat runner, there are certain pieces that you can recognize just from the radar range when you respawn back in the stage. Like, just from the amount of time that the radar spent as red when you respawned, I knew that this was a place where the bug used to be. So I wouldn't have needed a hint for this, and I could have just immediately gotten my piece 3 after... My piece 3 hint after getting this piece.
That was a terrible first piece grab time.
Like, generally speaking, if the radar is red like that and it stays red for, like, half of your descent to the floor like this, then that generally means that it's a place where the bug used to be. And for some weird reason, if it's red for a brief second and then it almost immediately goes yellow, that means it's Beauty and the Beast.
That's a terrible first piece grab time, but, like, whatever, bro.
Even though they should be, like, nearly equidistant.
That grab.
Well, I mean, Beauty and the Beast is like a bit further away, but it doesn't look that much further away. And then above Omochao sucks. I'm not sure about this route. I would probably just go to core and do the clip for this, but... Yeah, looking at this, I would actually definitely do the... Looking at how much time this is taking, I'd definitely just prefer to use the core clip for this. Yeah, especially because then you ideally don't really have to deal with that ghost, which is really awkward from that pulley, but... The piece set was not particularly good. There's like... 104 isn't a stage time that I would be particularly happy with in a run, but that was not a very favourable piece set. I mean, you got a blue piece and then a respawn piece, which is nice, but above Omochao is such a bad last piece. If you're not particularly confident with the core clip that I'm talking about, then I can definitely give a quick demonstration here and a couple of pointers. So typically when people talk about the green door clip, they specifically mean the left side one. Because you can clip on both sides. Doing the right side clip is often used for, as well, reaching the Gorilla's Chase area. I don't particularly like the right side clip, and I instead use the left side clip nowadays. It just has a couple of rules that you really need to follow. You have camera control in this area, so you want to... try and manipulate the camera, because if you approach normally, then this is going to be your default camera view, where you're facing like right into the corner, but you want the camera to be facing more towards the door like this. And if you just jump into the top corner like this, just be against it, jump into the top corner, and then at the top point, if you then just do a glide upwards, you should go straight through. Nice credits. But that's not quite enough, because if you just use a flat up input, then you'll consistently get what just happened to me here, which is you'll clip through, but then you'll clip just in the other side of the door. Like, this will consistently happen. So this is a little bit of a weird clip where you want to use the up input, but then as soon as you perform the glide input and clip through the door, you then want to angle left quite aggressively. Like, you need to initiate the clip by holding up, but then as soon as you get it, you need to go up left. Like that. And then you just end up in this sort of area. But the main reason that that clip fails in the first place is because you're not angling the camera straight enough to the door. Like, the camera needs to be almost facing the door directly for that to work well.
SRNG, KBB, Acrofoot.
Okay. Egg Ghost.
If I'm not getting both in 3 times tries run, what am I saying? I'm way far ahead.
So, if you're going to be using Restart Abuse on Green Forest and Aquatic Mine, there's no reason to not use it here. It's just the same thing. Like, you just restart the fight as soon as you gain control, and as long as you do it early, it saves time. So just do the same thing in this boss.
If I get past KBB, I will get lives on EG.
Okay, that was actually not a bad approach. Nice pocket monster music. Whoa, okay, let me have a bit more of a detailed look at this. Yeah, your angle was wiggling around quite a lot, approaching King Boom Boo, which did some way towards losing a bit of speed here, I think. And I'm not sure here. I've talked before about my method of saying when you can do the punches, that once he lands on the ground like this, flashes red like 5 times, 5-6 times. So if I slow it down here, then we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then he's vulnerable again. So by the time that flashing ends, it is safe to go. So I'm just wondering if you were trying to gauge if you were close enough to hit him, and it turns out in this situation, apparently you weren't. I think at the very moment that you tried to deliver the punch, you just angled a bit further too much up. Like, you had the up left angle, I think, but then you went a little further up, and I think that actually caused you to miss. Yeah, I'm looking at it again, and you had like the right angle, and then right before you delivered the punch, you second guessed and you went further up, and that actually caused you to miss, because that looked to me like it should have hit. But right before you did the punch, you went too far up.
Yeah. This is epic.
You kind of did it again, but it didn't punish you that time. This is just a bit of a habit you've got, I think. You're actually doing it consistently every time. Every time you deliver the punch, you are angling the control stick further up. So that, I think, is maybe just a habit that you need to try and get out of.
Brought it back down to what a normal run would have
because you can, as any GameCube runner will have told you, you can just continue to hold the up left notch. You can just hold that one control stick angle, and it will work quite well. But if you go back and like watch this video yourself, you will see that on your input cam, every time you're about to punch him, you are changing your control stick angle slightly, and you're aiming a little too far up. And I think in the first attempt, that's what caused you to miss that punch. So if that's going to maybe make you miss sometimes, that's maybe something you should pay attention to and try and just break the habit of, because I think that's causing problems in that fight. Otherwise, that was pretty good.
Fucking golds on execution stages. So now 2 lives is good enough, because like...
Okay, so not going for super bounces here, I see.
2 tries runs good as dead.
If you're not going to go for super bounces, then the best way that you can... Please. The best way that you can tackle a bounceless egg golem fight is to use regular bounces on the second back platform. So once you jump onto this platform, just double bounce and you can do that very easily. You do need to double bounce to get the height. Like, I'll hopefully be able to demonstrate here that if you just single bounce, it doesn't work particularly well. Like, yeah, you just don't get the height there.
The weak point is the head. Find a way to the top.
Whereas if you do a double bounce, then you get more height. And I think I got a pseudo task bounce there. Interesting.
Try to stay behind it. That's the way to get on top.
Yeah, you just need to make sure to double bounce there. It's pretty formulaic though, so still decent for a bounceless. Alright. The only thing I'm going to note here is that when you land on his arm like this, I'm looking at your input cam and you use left input. This actually causes problems, and it borderline causes the problem you had here where you just ran straight off the arm. It seems counterintuitive, but when you land on the arm like this, you actually want to use down right input. If you're moving towards the right, you want to use down right input, and then once you've landed, you can then rotate clockwise to left and do it like that. That actually does work better. I'll try and exit game and show that like now. Again, I don't have an input cam up, but just take my word that I'm using the inputs that I say I am. Nice. Nice. Hopefully I'm still going to land on an arm from here. Yeah, okay. So once I unpause, I'm just going to be holding down right on the control stick. And then once I can see that I've landed on his arm, I just do a clockwise rotation to left. I should have full control of Sonic and can stay on his arm. And once I've landed, I'm also going to be holding B to start a spin dash charge. Just like that. Just don't try and get greedy with the last hit like that. But that method works more consistently than you may think. Nice fight. Shit! Yeah, thanks for reminding me. It's always cool with runners who do not have the full screen region capture, making me use different windows and scene selections. I can just do it again, it's fine. Because I've also got I have to have my game over the chat as well, because again, I need full screen for the actual PV VOD that I'm capturing. I'm probably not going to be in the same place, but whatever. No, this can work, so. I love it when that happens. I love being inside him. Okay, so once again, once I unpause, I'm just going to be holding down right, and then once I land on the arm, I start holding B and I do a clockwise rotation to left. And Sonic just stays on the arm. It dropped my spin dash for reasons, but you can see that I stayed with full control of Sonic on the arm. Like, it worked well. So like I say, when you're moving to the right, you want to be using down right input, because it's the same in the opposite direction, that if you get knocked the other way, and you
Oh
end
my
up on his
kidding.
other arm, you want to
Muffin
then be
should
holding
try
down
to
left
use
and then do an anti-clockwise rotation to right. Just for some reason that if you are sticking in the direction that Sonic is going, you just retain much better control of him.
Bruh, shoot him.
This start of Eternal Engine is really awkward. I have a method that works for me, but it's a very awkward method. I can try and describe it. Hello? Alright. So once the stage starts, I like wait for Tails to fall halfway down, and then I hold right and start like pressing B rhythmically, and from right I do a clockwise rotation. It sounds weird, I know, but yeah. And then I also then do a pivot turn. It works well for me, but this took me like a long time to get used to. And you still sometimes miss an enemy. And I've again not been capturing the game. So just from a restart again. So you can see that the time that I start shooting is like half the way down. I'm trying to start my stick input at the same time as well. Sometimes you still miss the enemy though. It's just temperamental. This is like a very temperamental strat in my opinion. But yeah, it is what it is. As for whether this beetle's going to get in your way, you can generally use the in-game timer as a cue here. If you reach the top here and are like going to be releasing the shot pretty much before 13, then like at 13ish on the clock, the enemy's going to be like in the way. And if you're before that, then you're going to be beating the enemy slightly. I'll try and like play through the start of the stage again to hopefully show that I'm going to like not shoot that beetle in that area. And as long as I'm at that spot before 13, I should be comfortably beating him. It's difficult to be at 13 at that point though. Yeah, there we go. See if I can actually get just the clip from here. Oh, it's so free, guys. Alright. Okay, left side method. That looked... Wow, you're not even trying the right side? Interesting. Yeah, not even trying the right side seems suspicious. It looks to me like you were just angled far too sharply towards the wall. And also, well, the spot that you hit the wall as well, it was too soon and it caused a specific problem here. Because there is like a weird... This white, wall panel, the ones that are normally collapsible, and then this red marking here, it's like different joints. So like there's a joint between these 2 points, and you basically just ran straight into it, and it caused you to bounce off, and then you just had a misaligned approach. Like you can see how Tails gets forced away from the wall a little bit there. I'll slow it down and run it back a bit. Like, Tails just gets forced backwards, and that shouldn't normally happen, so I think that's just because you're hitting, like, the wall joint there, which is part of the reason why the typical strats for the approach are so strict and controlled, because you need to kind of do this strictly, otherwise you have significant problems. And then you got, like, a second adjustment when you were reaching the clipping point. Like, it looked to me like the spot where you jumped and shot, like, at the floor point here, this looked like it was the correct timing, but you got moved along. Like, so this might have worked if your approach had been correct, because you got moved here as you're approaching, and it happens again just before you actually do the jump and shoot. Like that. So I think that probably has a good chance of actually putting you out of position. Like, it could be on this attempt you would have actually gotten it, but maybe that actually put you out of position for it. It's hard for me to say. But something definitely happened there. It kind of happened again there, actually. This is very odd. It may be that you're just approaching the wall at too sharp of an angle. Because I'm not as knowledgeable on... Well, I mean, it happened again, but then you actually got it. So yeah, this skip is just really, really odd. I mean, everyone who does this skip knows that this skip is just kind of bullshit. Sometimes it just behaves as though it doesn't want to work. But hey, I can mostly skip ahead now.
So did I miss it, or... No, I'm good, I'm good. Okay.
No, but you're going to click back and bounce. There you go. Other. There you go. Yep. You just need to hover at the bottom of the shaft there, otherwise you do continue to fall. I'm sure you know that. Well, I mean, it's better than you would get with the old Eternal Legend skip, so that's something. I'm sure you know what you're doing with that skip, so just, you know, continue to practice it and try and get it as much as you can. It's all you can ever really do with that skip. Nice exit.
Do I even need to reset? Because, like, if I mess up CGS...
No, you definitely didn't need to reset, because Ark's huge storage area is a... Yep, there you go, you got it again. So now you've got to go for it. And again, it is a perfectly good piece. So, when you're approaching the center here in Meteor Herd, one thing you should definitely be practicing here is camera control. Because you have the free piece that's, like, halfway down this pillar here. But with no camera control, you've got basically no time to check for it. Like, there's currently about a second between when you're going to be on the rocket here. And you don't really have a lot of time to check this spot here. So what you should instead be doing is using the camera triggers to force free cam in that spot. Because if you, well, I'm currently holding R, which just rotates the camera, you know, anti-clockwise. But then if I continue to hold L at the same time, it fixes the camera in place. So this is with R, and this is with L and R. And you can utilize that when you're approaching the center to get a completely unobstructed view of that area of the stage. Like you can see, look at this pure view that I've got of that spot where the free piece is. So that's absolutely free to do. And considering that piece is so valuable to see for free, there's no real excuse for missing that if you're using the free cam exploit. Yeah, so the radar lets you know which piece this is, so you correctly went to the right one. Nice. This is up top. And you've got a hint right after the piece, thankfully. Same thing again, that generally when I'm taking like all the rockets in this stage, I'm just using camera control near the top because you just aren't using the camera triggers here, and this gives you a really awkward... Well, now you're using the camera trigger after you've got off, but you could have used it at an earlier point, and it would have just given you a much more favourable like camera position. And jump from the start. These pieces are okay. Yeah, these pieces are certainly okay. Try not to do this. This is just a bad hunting character movement habit, rapidly drill diving and resetting. This is just slower and it causes navigation problems. Just don't do this if you can help it. And you can help it because it's never better. Just don't do this. If you're trying to go somewhere, just do all the horizontal movement and then all the vertical movement in one go if you can. It's just going to generally be more optimal. As for which piece this is, I think at this point it's either going to be in... I want to say, I've forgotten even where this is, but maybe this one, or this one. I think it's the 3 rocks. Okay, it was that one. Because it can be in one of those 3, and when you reach that area, you use the radar to determine which one it is, especially at the spring. But when you're at the spring, if the radar isn't pinging, it's the one that's further away. If it's green, it's that one that you just had that's in the middle, and if it's yellow, then it's the closer one that's rotating very quickly. So, the Ringless Rouge strat. If you're going to be using this, then it's well worth just getting as much mileage out of it as you can. Which is dependent on understanding exactly when you gain control in the fight. The text is going to disappear and the camera is going to start moving at pretty much 8 dead on the clock. It's going to happen at like 8.02. And that is when you have control of Knuckles and can be taking actions. So at that point, you can just jump and do a neutral stick glide towards her, just a double A input, and you can hopefully get the first hit before the camera even fully pans around. So you could have gotten the hit by now, rather than waiting to see what you're doing. Because if you just understand the method, the input is pretty much the same regardless of if you can see what you're doing or not, so you really don't need to wait for the camera to help you, and it honestly wastes a lot of the time save that this provides, and it makes it, in my opinion, barely even worth doing if you're going to wait this long to do the ringless strap. Continually drill diving her I don't particularly like, but if that gets you consistent fights, then that's the important thing.
Let's get it, boys.
But it caused a little bit of a problem halfway through the fight, actually, where after the second hit, I think, you ended up colliding with one of her attacks and you both flew apart. That can potentially cause significant issues if she then starts acting erratically after it. But that generally doesn't happen as long as you're just jumping around her and timing your drill dives into her when her iframes have run out. And I personally use her voice clips to determine that. There's specific audio cues you can use on her voice lines to know when she's vulnerable. So yeah, at that point you flew apart and you almost lost control of the fight there.
Drums tries free.
Which would have really sucked. So this movement was largely pretty good. The only thing that you're not doing, which you could be doing with the movement here, is using a bounce when you reach the bottom of the slope. By that I mean you do spin dash, spin dash, spin dash, which is all correct. But then once you reach the bottom of the slope, you just do a regular jump, because you can see that Sonic is in the jump form. What you can instead be doing is just a jump and bounce. Like, you'll notice when I do it here that Sonic is going to be in the bounce form. And again, because I'm not holding A and spending hover frames, I'm going to lose less speed by doing it. Nice enemy getting in the way. So that generally ends up being a little faster. Just something to bear in mind. Okay. Not sure how I feel about some of the things that I'm seeing here, though. Generally, this was alright, leading up to getting to the door here, but jumping and homing attacking here, I don't understand the value in that. And then you do a single spin dash here, and just bounce once after you get off the ledge. This is actually a fair bit slower, because you don't get the full downwards speed when you perform the first bounce. You instead only really get that if you do a double bounce. Like if you spin dash through that hallway, and then if you bounce once to just start bouncing, and then if you bounce the second time once you've actually left the ledge, then you will have like the full downwards momentum. It sounds a little weird the way I'm wording it, so I'll try and just do it here. So like you have this view. I'm going to try and get this enemy out of the way. Yeah. So I have this view, and basically what you did was just let it go. And then once you left this ledge, you bounced. I mean, I just homing attack there as well, but you waited until then to bounce. And what you can do is like this instead. Hello? Hello? Please bounce, dude. Thank you. Get this enemy again. Alright, so I do my first bounce like that, and then if I bounce again, then Sonic just goes down there super fast. So again, all in one uninterrupted go. I think I did 2 bounces there. Either way, it is faster if you can get it like that, I believe. Oh, that was weird. I think you just did the bounce too late there. Yeah, that looks like it just came out too late. Typically what I do here is I mean, a spin dash here is normal, but once I get past these boxes, I just try and do a super bounce immediately. Because you need like enough height to clear these wooden boxes, which you kind of got trapped on there, and it caused problems. So if you just do that bounce a little earlier, I think that will generally work a bit better. Okay, safety check. I definitely don't disagree with that. And you actually got on that rail really quickly. Like, you had a lot of speed going on that rail. Nice. First try CGSS. Now just hit the goal ring. It looked like a bit of a janky angle going towards it, but... Okay, then you used a pause extend. Now you're bouncing. Bit high, but this should work. Oh, just... Okay, the recovery. That still counts.
Okay.
That still counts, right? So... Yeah, just because of the way... Like I mentioned here, the weird angle that it looked like you had once you were out of bounds. Like, Sonic is kind of getting dragged up a bit, and it took a bit to equalize him out. So, already, like, I'm looking at your input cam again, and you're holding almost hard left. You could just be holding a bit more up here. So, like I say, currently it's left with a very slight amount of up. Just add a little more up to this, because you did still end up too high to really hit the goal ring. And this is, considering you had a pause extend and a bounce, 2 ways to augment your distance, ending up being too high up just means that you're using too much left input and not enough up input. Because once you see this pillar in the background, the one underneath it here is where you want to be. So once Sonic gets out of the ball animation there and does the homing attack, you want his hand to like already be in line with here, which you needed to like angle really aggressively down to manage, and it's already when you're about to hit the goal ring, so it's kind of, it was almost too little too late. And then you ended up on the roof, which this is like a last-minute backup measure, which you can't rely on being able to use. So I'd still work on your CGSS practice and just try and hit the goal ring super clean. Just making sure that you're getting the minute details of where you're going is really important for CGSS.
Right now, because this is... Come on, Zeb. This is stage 4. Please, thank you. Don't know why you're going that way, bro, but like, okay.
Yeah, Eggman's behaving a bit weirdly right now. You can definitely exploit his AI for a third hit, though.
Don't know.
By that I mean, so the first hit should always be pretty consistent. You should, well, first of all, this is kind of the same detail as I mentioned in Eggman 1. You fired the first shot upwards, it looks like you're just mashing the button as the fight begins. I'm gonna look at the input cam again.
Please.
Yeah, you're mashing the button as the fight begins. That's not a very good way to approach the start of the fight, because it pretty much means that this first shot is always going to miss, and he starts moving off sooner, which causes 2 different sets of problems. Because number one, you want to really fire as many shots as you can in this direction to get as many chances of hitting him as you can. So if this shot's just going in the wrong direction, then it's just harder to hit him, because you've got fewer shots that actually have a realistic chance of contacting him. So, same as I mentioned in Eggman 1, you're using the correct angle, but you should make sure that you're facing this angle before you actually shoot. Either do that, or run up to him when the fight begins, and wait until you're close to him before you fire the first shot. That can give you a free first hit as well, because Eggman doesn't start moving until you fire your first shot. So if you just like run up to this point and then fire a shot in his face, it will hit him 100%, as long as you don't fire it too early and he gets out of the way fast enough. But otherwise, if you're going to go with this strat, which to be fair is the one that I use in runs and I can get low 14s with it, just make sure you're facing in this direction, then start firing the shots, and you should have like 3 good shots in his line of path, the path that he takes, and it's very unlikely that he's going to avoid all 3 of them.
Thank you.
And then from that point, he should get stuck like around here and start trying to shoot towards you.
Why you're going that way, bro, but like, okay.
So, this is a weird situation, kind of, but the idea of hitting him in between his hits is that typically once you hit him, it was really weird with this specific one because he didn't start firing immediately. Like, he doesn't start firing until the animation ends, but now he's firing his no-scope shots, and I'm going to slow this down. You're going to see that he's probably going to fire like 6 or 7 no-scope shots. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and then his laser comes out. He's continuing to fire though. He's behaving really weirdly here, but in a regular fight, he tends to shoot like 6 or 7 no-scope shots in response to getting hit. So you can use that to just circle strafe him and know when he's about to stop firing. You can just like use the audio of the shots coming to know when you should aim back up and just snipe him. If you watch how I do the fight in runs, that's specifically what I'm doing. I'm just letting him fire himself out, and I'm just reacting. But if you were aggressively circle strafing here, because you were standing still, you took the hit there, but if you were circle strafing him in that spot, you could have avoided these shots and still gotten a hit in before the laser comes out, because if I slow it down again, if you now instead pay attention to his iframes, the way that the mech is just flashing, you can see that it's already ended there, so if I run it back a little bit. So he's got iframes. So at this point, this is when the iframes have run out. He's completely vulnerable now. And if you look at the timer, it's 12.59 right now. And it was like 12.9 before the shot actually came out. So if I advance this frame by frame, yeah, pretty much at 12.5, he's vulnerable. And it's not until past like 12.9 that the laser comes out. So there's almost half a second where you're able to just fire a shot in his face while he's completely vulnerable and get a hit in before the laser fires. So at this point in the fight, you could have already had hit 3 in. And at this point, if that had happened, you can just face tank the laser with this much health left and just take an intentional damage boost off it, because whilst he's firing the laser, he's completely immobile. So you can just face tank it like this, and then end up in this spot, and the last hit is, you know, completely free. You just face up and shoot him right in the face. You just need to make sure that you're not completely toe-to-toe with him, because if you are in super close range, then obviously you're going to propeller punch him instead, which, if you're low on health, is like the worst thing that can happen, because it causes a lot of distance. He fires really aggressively, and if he fires another laser after you've sent him to long distance, then that is very difficult to avoid. Like, it's really difficult to avoid a laser from across the arena. So in other words, that if you'd gotten the snipe hit before he fired the laser, that shot would have ended the fight. And then, yeah, there's the propeller punch. And there's the laser from across the arena. That, see, it's I'm telling you, the stuff happens. And then it's like a play-by-play. Like, I say the things that can go wrong from resulting from accidentally punching him, and then it just happens back-to-back, just getting shot, and then the laser from across the arena. This is why you really need to make sure on Eggman 2, just don't be toe-to-toe with him. You need to be like close enough to be able to avoid the laser, but just don't be right in his face. If you absolutely do need to be right in his face, you can mitigate it by being airborne. Like if you are hovering, Tails can't use the punch whilst he's hovering. So that's something you can do. It's something that Dark Pro uses. I can't use it very well, but it's worth remembering that if you really need to be close to him, then as long as you're hovering, you can't at least punch him. So yeah, definitely some lessons to take from this fight. When the fight starts, like I say, make sure you're facing in the right direction before you start. Like that, basically, yeah. And then just make sure you have a consistent angle. And there's the shots that you can try and exploit with the timing. That's a good example of what I mean. That after this first hit, he responds by firing some no-scope shots to you. So this is where I can actually slow down and count out the hits. Yeah. So let's have a look. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and then he turns away. So after his 6th shot there, he just started moving to the left again, and that should pretty consistently happen. So you can use this in real time to count out when to hit him again. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Like, because they're evenly spaced apart, they're not so fast that you can't use it to set up a rhythm for when to hit him. Just like when he's about to fire a 6th shot, just turn back towards him and fire a shot right in his face. Yeah, I just don't agree with the way that you're face tanking a hit while he's readying the laser there, because it's preventing you from getting a 3rd hit before the laser hits you. If you just continue to circle strafe from there, you can just easily get a 3rd hit before the laser hits. And as long as you're above half health, then you can just
Maybe
treat the laser as any
hopefully
other
I'll
damage
fuck up
boost
FR
shot.
skip, because one fuck up FR skip runs dead because I have a perfect shadow too.
Okay. So just jump a little earlier off this rail to not get the trick here. Like, it's when you just jump too close to the edge of the rail that you get the trick jump there, and it's honestly quite slow, and then causes problems like that.
Sonic,
Yeah.
I really appreciate it, bro.
Yeah. As soon as one mistake happens, then a bunch of mistakes start happening on top of them.
Dead now, unless I get a perfect shot of 2, by the way. Oh, Run's actually dead now.
Oh man, that was... I'm not particularly a fan of that approach to FR skip, but if it actually
This is like a 45.
got you in a good position to get it, then yeah, I
mean,
guess.
a 44. Well, that...
And yeah, this is just going to be FR skip now. Imagine that.
Please, Shadow. Please, Shadow.
Look at this, about to be
Please,
marginal
Shadow.
PB. These are the best PBs.
Hut, 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 hut.
Okay, so a couple of things to note here. Well, the most important thing to start off the fight is starting inputs at the right time. This is kind of the same deal as I mentioned with Rouge, where in the Rouge fight, you want to be taking control of Knuckles, i.e. starting inputs at like 8 on the timer. It's the same thing here with Shadow, except at 6 on the clock.
Hut, 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 hut.
So at this point, you have control of Sonic. Like, the timer has progressed to 6.07. So at this point, if on this frame you did an A input, it would jump. You should do this as soon as possible. Especially because once the fight actually gets going, you have a bit of a delayed start. And this hit is a little bit delayed. You can see here that this platform is collapsing. So this like causes unnecessary problems with the fight, where if you get forced back from a low rebound or something, this is just going to cause problems, and you could even take an accidental death from homing attacking at the wrong time. It's part of the reason why it's important to start inputs on this fight as soon as you can, because it actually tends to give you a favourable position with where these platforms are starting to fall. And then at this point, I think you just were getting too nervous and you just messed up the rhythm there. That's what I see, at least. Yeah, your first homing attack here was actually early as well. The rhythm itself was still good, but your first homing attack was a bit early. Like, if I play this back again, you'll notice that you do the first homing attack like before he's even landed, and it's very lucky that he actually did jump in response to the first homing attack. So on this one. Yeah, like, it's a bit surprising that he did that. It definitely did well at the end there to not cave to the pressure, though, like I have to say, because that is a high pressure situation, needing to get a good shadow fight to maintain the PB. Knowing that like one big mistake is like going to kill it, and the fight already wasn't going perfectly, and once there is like one mistake on the fight, it's super easy to just kind of like mentally think, fuck this, and just start playing really badly. So you did honestly do really well at the end there to keep it together and get the PB in the end. Like, that's better than a lot of people actually perform on the Shadow fight. It's a major choking point, and a lot of people don't think that fight is a choking point until it actually kills a run, and it has killed a run for a lot of people. There's a couple of different ways you can use the rhythm, and since Sonic 2 is the last Dark Story scene, I both recommend it as the practice method for this fight, but I can also just use it for some demonstrations. But there's a couple of different like rhythms you can use. You can either use like 3 evenly spaced homing attacks like you use, and I've kind of been using that lately as well. This also shows what I mean about doing a jump at 6. So you could hopefully hear my button tapping in time with the seconds ticking up there, and when the timer reached 6, that input caused the jump, is what I mean. But as for the different rhythms that you can use, there's, you know, the evenly spaced ones that we currently use. And I've also seen people use 2 quick ones and then a delayed third one, which I used to use. But, you know, it's a bit weird. I'll try it here in this fight. And I messed it up. And then, yay, you get problems in this fight when you lose control of it. Let's try one more time with the weird stuttered rhythm. Yeah, so like either one can work, but it's just whichever you find most consistent. But either way, very grateful for you for submitting this PB.
You have no idea how much I hate myself right now, bro.
That is an interesting ending. But yeah, I mean, a PB is a PB. It's a 27 down to a 27. And the RTA is, I mean, the RTA from stuff like Aquatic Mine. But yeah, there was quite a lot to comment on in this run. I'm not really sure what I would particularly evaluate as like strengths and weaknesses. I mean, Eggman 2 was one of the most egregious mistakes of the run, probably. Like, if there was something that can just be a significant improvement, then Eggman 2. And, like, King Boom Boo as well, I suppose. So, when you were saying, like, the bosses were not very good in this run, I'd probably agree with that. The main thing to practice is bosses, for getting some consistent time save. You did struggle with getting out of bounds on Eternal Engine as well, but that's Eternal Engine. It's a very difficult stage, and anyone should be grateful for having a clean Eternal Engine in PB now if they're going for the new skip. CGSS was really good. Some other stages were generally quite good as well. I would work on as well what I mentioned about getting on and off the weight in Mission Street, because if you haven't like gotten Zero Cycle yet, then from what I saw in this run, the way that you play around the weight is honestly the only thing that's preventing you from getting Zero Cycle. The rest of the stage is good enough to get Zero Cycle. So as long as you can get on it quickly and then get off it quickly, you should be getting Zero Cycle without too much difficulty, I think. But yes, thank you once again. I'm going to, when I can, just highlight this, export it to YouTube. People can use it as a bit of a learning tool. And I'm going to find a stream to host right about now.